He's a good guy.
Yes. Yes.
Everywhere.
Let's see, I have all these papers, so hopefully I will. Okay, turn your mics on, please. Okay, ready? In accordance with Section 5 of the Open Public Meetings Act, be advised that a notice of this meeting was made by posting on the bulletin board in Town Hall and forwarding to the officially designated newspapers that this meeting would take place at Town Hall at 7:30 p.m. on Tuesday, August 14th. Would everyone please stand to salute the flag? I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Okay. Roll call, please.
Mr. Levy?
Here.
Ms. Lieberberg?
Here.
Ms. Rosenberg?
Here.
Ms. Bell-Eglo?
Here.
And Mayor Burston.
Here. May I have a motion to approve the agenda?
So moved.
May I have a second?
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? May I have a motion to approve the April 17th, 2018 Township Committee meeting minutes?
So moved.
May I have a second?
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? And I'm recused from those. May I have a motion to approve the May 1st, 2018 Township Committee meeting minutes?
So moved.
May I have a second?
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye. Aye.
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? May I have a motion to approve the May 1st, 2018 Special Township Committee meeting minutes?
So moved.
May I have a second?
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Does our county, George, you are here, are you not? You are.
One announcement, Mayor, there is the 5th Annual Heroes for Children 5K, which is a USATF certified run scheduled for September 15th at the Clipper Pavilion in West Orange. Registrations are now open at njca5k.com. And that is also on the county's website if anybody would like to register. And that's the only item I have to report on tonight.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Enjoy the rest of the summer, if we have any. I'm going to recognize Committeewoman Bell-Eglo to introduce Gable Associates.
Yes, hi. Thank you. I would like to introduce Bob Chilton from Gable Associates. Gable Associates is the consultant that was chosen by the Sustainable Essex Alliance Energy Procurement Cooperative. Mr. Chilton will give a brief presentation on where this group is on the road to a community energy aggregation program that has been discussed at the Township Committee over the past several months.
Subject to the rules of a government energy aggregation program, which includes opt-out rights for residents and things like that, which I can get into. With a collective group like this, it creates a lot of purchasing power. What is required is to have one entity be what's called the lead agency that really handles the administrative functions of issuing the bid process and actually voting on an award of contract. As I said, Maplewood is the lead agency. They have filed for status as a cooperative pricing system with the Department of Community Affairs. I think all of the member towns have passed ordinances. One of the first step in creating a community energy aggregation program, or CEA program as we call it, is for each town to pass an ordinance. Each town has done that. I believe each town has now passed resolutions to join the co-op. So once the registration of the cooperative is approved by DCA, then we can officially have all the towns join in the cooperative, creating that process. So that's sort of we're pretty far along. We're almost there in terms of putting the group formally together under the eyes of the Department of Community Affairs. Now, from the perspective of actually going out to bid for the electricity supply, for the green electricity supply, what happens is the next formal step is for the lead agency, that being Maplewood, to submit draft bid documents and contract documents to the Board of Public Utilities for their review to make sure that the documents are consistent with their regulations. In order to get to the point of us submitting draft documents to the BPU, we have to have draft documents that all 6 towns are comfortable with. So we've already had one organizational meeting, I would say it was probably over a month or so ago, where it was discussed, and what was envisioned is a working group put together from representatives from all 6 towns to collectively bring the bid documents back to their respective administrations and governing bodies, talk about what's in there, come together to have meetings, and then ultimately come to an agreement on the form of those contracts. We, as an energy consultant, have been involved in dozens of these types of programs, so we prepare the initial documents, and then we can help guide the discussion in terms of the pros and cons of different particular terms, what the ramifications are of the specific renewable energy product that is identified in the bid documents. And what we envision is that through this collaborative and collective process, ultimately we wind up with bid documents that everyone is comfortable with. Those would then be submitted to the BPU for their review. Once that review period is over, we can then actually issue the RFP. The current time frame, roughly as envisioned, it's still a little loose, is to have those the lead agency share the initial draft documents with the participating municipalities, probably right after Labor Day. And then we built in a process. Actually, it might even be before Labor Day. I take that back. And then we envision about a month process to go through iterations, to have discussions, and then come up with a final agreement. But obviously, that time frame can be a little quicker or a little slower, depending on how quickly consensus is developed on those documents. The rough schedule that is currently envisioned is to actually have the RFP issued around mid to late October. Again, that's just penciled in at this point. It can be adjusted in accordance with developments as they happen. Usually the RFPs are on the streets for about 4 weeks, usually 3 to 4 weeks, closer to 4. And that provides an opportunity for suppliers to be vetted. Suppliers will respond to the RFP. They will submit their qualifications, not only the legal forms, et cetera, but also their actual experience with this type of work specifically. Those are vetted, those are evaluated, each of the suppliers are evaluated. And then the second stage is for the suppliers that have been qualified to actually submit their proposals. And they will be submitting proposals based upon the specifications that you all have collectively agreed to in terms of the length of the contract, the specific content of the renewable energy. And then the process, as you're probably familiar with on the municipal account bids, energy bids are a lot different than most bids. The energy markets change very quickly, requires a quick decision because typically suppliers are not able to hold their prices for more than a matter of hours, or in some cases up to a day. Markets change too much, and suppliers either won't bid or they'll put a huge premium in their price if they have to hold their bid for, days and days on end. So the process on bid day is for bids to come in usually early afternoon. We do our thing. We evaluate the bids. We rank them. We compare them to the utility price to compare, provide a report. And then in this case, with a cooperative, what we envision, and this is obviously going to be subject to the discussions of all the towns as to the exact mechanics, but what we envision is that there would be some type of that working group would convene, collectively review and discuss the results, and then presumably come to a unanimous decision one way or the other as far as the recommendation of that working group to the Maplewood governing body for the decision that evening. So it's typically in these cooperative pricing systems, in my experience, we've had several of them that we run. It is a very collaborative process. There's a lot of discussion prior to bid day so that everyone is on board with the specific criteria that will be applied. And then there's a further discussion after the bids come in as to the results of the bid and how those line up with pre-established criteria. And then ultimately, the governing body of the lead agency has the guidance it needs to make a decision on the evening of the bids. So that's generally how the process will work and the timing. Just a little bit, I think you're generally familiar with how these types of programs work, but just in general for the public's benefit is initially in the bid process, all of the residential accounts that don't already have a third-party supply contract or that don't have a solar generating system of their own, which we can talk about if you like, are initially included. If a contract is awarded, there's a notification and information package that gets sent out to every eligible resident with all the necessary information in terms of the identity of the supplier, the price, the savings versus the utility tariff, the renewable content. And then folks are given 30 days to decide whether they want to opt out of the program. And anyone can opt out. There's no repercussions for opting out. There's numerous ways to opt out, either by telephone, by mail, by internet, email. After the 30-day period is over, the folks that haven't opted out, and that in our experience has been a pretty high percentage of folks remain in because they see the benefit of the program. They're enrolled in the program. The program starts. The supplier would issue its charges through the PSE&G bill. That doesn't change, or JCP&L bill, depending on the town in the co-op. And so there's no change in the billing. There's just simply a line item now for the supplier charges that replaces the utility charges for power supply. And then folks can still opt out anytime they want, anytime during the contract. Month in, 6 months in, doesn't matter. There's no penalties. That's specified in the contract. So folks have the ability to leave anytime they want if they change their mind or find another supplier that's cheaper or et cetera. So I think that's really kind of a quick overview that I wanted to give, and I'm certainly happy to answer any questions that you have.
Does anyone have any questions of Mr. Chilton?
A quick question.
Yeah.
If too many people do opt out, which probably won't happen, will that change the contract and the promise of price?
It doesn't. That's a risk the suppliers take. There's no minimum volumes or minimum number of customers. Suppliers have done this long enough that they have a pretty good model as to how many people opt out, and they price that migration risk into their price, but the contract is clear. There's no minimum number of customers or volumes. The price is the price for whoever remains.
Even if one of the towns of the 6 back out, would that substantially change things?
Well, the towns can certainly back out of the deal up to the point where we're issuing the bid.
Okay.
When suppliers are bidding on specifications, they're bidding on X number of towns, X number of residents. They take the risk for how many people opt out, et cetera. But suppliers can't bid on something where any one of the towns can walk out anytime they want. So that decision would be made by a town up until the time the bid is issued. And then again, the other important point is what we envision is a collective decision on the award of the contract. So the contract would only be awarded by Maplewood if all the towns reviewed the results and said, yeah, this meets our criteria, meets our priorities, and we collectively agree and we make a collective recommendation to the Maplewood governing body. So that's how that kind of protects that issue.
Thank you. Any other questions?
When would the first bid take place? And when would you anticipate that?
So the schedule we're looking at now, we think if we issued the RFP in, say, mid to late October, we'd be taking bids around the middle of November. And that would put us in a position, there's a very lengthy process for, after the bid award is made, for getting the necessary information from the utility, getting all of the notification packages finalized, proof set up, mailed, and then there's the 30-day opt-out period, and then there's a period to actually enroll the accounts. So for that time frame, we'll say we took bids in mid-November, we would be looking at a contract that would actually start probably in March of 2019, which actually is a good thing because we've been doing a lot of bids. We do many bids for many years. The last 9 months have been pretty slim pickings. The market right now is just not in a great place, but and these things kind of go in cycles. And we're seeing much more promising land, say, so to speak, for contracts starting next year. So I think the timing is really perfect. We're not seeing any successful bids for awards for contracts starting before next spring anyway. So the timing really is about where it should be. We've been doing some bids actively the last few months. Haven't awarded those contracts. We are reissuing, we call refresh pricing on those bids. We keep them open. And that's essentially what we're looking at now, is most likely, we think by next spring, contracts starting next spring are gonna have much better pricing.
Is that because the correlation between the price of oil and the price?
No, there are a number of reasons related to energy markets, which I could probably put this whole room to sleep with in about 5 minutes. But there's a number of things that have happened in the market that have affected suppliers' prices that haven't yet flowed through to the utilities prices. So there's a little bit of a mismatch there. There was a recent bill two bills signed into law by Governor Murphy a couple months ago, which have changed the landscape a little bit, which has to be assimilated into the marketplace. And there's also sort of a 1-year spike in one of the components of supplier pricing that is expiring the end of May next year. So that will sort of roll off the board, and that will help pricing too. And, I guess I said I can bore you with the details as much as you want. But essentially, there's a number of things happening that have kind of created a little bit of a mismatch between supplier costs and utility costs, which are only temporary. And there are a couple of market spikes which are only temporary as well.
We have a couple of resolutions on for tonight that deal with this issue, one of which is electric distribution company aggregation agreement with JCP&L. Can you just quickly sort of describe what that's the purpose of
Sure.
that agreement?
So one of the things required in the BPU's rules is there are 2 points at which the utility has to lend a hand, if you will, to the program for any town. One is sort of before you go out to bid, they provide aggregate information on the number of customers, what their monthly usage is, what their peak usage is. We use that to put in the bid specs so suppliers know what they're bidding on. The second point is if there's a contract award made, now the utility has to provide the actual customer list, their account numbers, their mailing address, so we can then reach out to them individually and send them the notification. So the BPU rules require the utilities to do that, but also require the town and the utility to sign an EDC agreement, which basically lays out the terms and conditions under which the two parties cooperate on those 2 points. The EDC agreement is a template that probably about 6 years ago now was developed by, with BPU, market participants, and the utilities. That is now a template which is used for every town. And unfortunately, the utilities really don't vary off of those terms and conditions. It's kind of a take or leave it, but there's really nothing untoward in those agreements. They're probably longer than they need to be, given there's only 2 things that I talked about where there's interaction, but nonetheless, people get involved and, et cetera. So that's what that is. That's just required under BPU rules so that the utility can provide the information required to support the program.
Okay. And the other agreement that we're going to be entering into is with Maplewood Township to implement a cooperative pricing system. And could you just address that?
So that was what I spoke about at the top, where Maplewood, when multiple towns are bidding together, they have to formally form a cooperative pricing system. The lead agency, in this case Maplewood, has already filed the paperwork to register the Sustainable Essex Alliance as a cooperative pricing system. They will, any day now, they're going to be appointed as lead agency. And then what's required to submit to the DCA, or Division of Local Government Services, is to add participating municipalities to the cooperative pricing system. We have to submit the reso passed by every participating municipality formally joining the cooperative pricing system. So that really is that's the formal document that has you joining the cooperative pricing system. That's submitted to DCA. Again, all that's doing is committing you to the cooperative pricing system. It doesn't commit you at this point to follow through all the way through the bidding process, and it doesn't commit you at this point to a contract with a supplier. It's just the next administrative step in the process for setting up the cooperative pricing system.
Thank you very much.
Okay.
Any other questions?
Thank you.
Thank
Okay.
you.
All right, you're welcome.
can you wait 1 second? Yeah, actually, are there any questions, if you don't mind, from our public to Mr. Chilton? Chilton. I want to say Hilton, and I knew that was wrong. Chilton.
Do you want me to come up?
Yes, please. And identify yourself for the record.
Hi, Marilee Respect, 91 Whittingham Terrace, Millburn. So this may have nothing to do with the whole pricing schema or whatever, but I've had occasion to have trees fall on my house and bring power lines down. So in those cases, JCP&L and their partners came and removed the trees from the road and everything. How does that, could you explain
Sure.
how this
It's a great
impacts us?
question, 'cause a lot of people ask that.
Thank you.
So, third-party supply is really just the source of power that is generated far away. The distribution system, which is what we're talking about, is still maintained by JCP&L. And, right now, there are roughly, on average, I think about 12% of residential customers already have third-party supply, either through one of these programs or they selected their own. And they're scattered throughout the state, throughout each individual town. And the businesses, it's a higher percentage. Industrial customers is probably about 80%. Those folks are all scattered through the distribution system. So those are on third-party supply. Other folks are still getting their supply from the utility. They're all on the same circuits. They're intermingled. They're next to each other. So JCP&L is still responsible for maintaining those wires. The supplier is only getting the juice to the interconnection point. So nothing changes with regard to who turns the lights back on. That's still JCP&L's responsibility.
For good or bad? Thank you.
Yeah, I'm not
Any other
gonna
questions
touch
for
that
Mr.
one.
Chilton? Yes. One more, Mr. Chilton.
Sure.
Thank you.
Phil Kirsch, 93 Cedar Street. We just had solar put in, and you mentioned about that, could you explain a little about where that comes in? Like if we have a chance to be part of it, should we?
Sure. So what we do, in our sort of going through this over the years, we have come to the conclusion that folks that have their own solar are better off not being in these programs. The reason is a couple reasons. One is that most solar systems on residential properties do you have it in yet, or it's in process? So it probably satisfies the majority of your usage, and what typically happens is JCP&L does something called banking and net metering. So when you overproduce, typically in the summer, they bank it and apply it against your rates in the fall and the winter, so that you get full retail credit for your energy, even in months when you're sort of using that bank. Utility's able to do that because they are regulated by the BPU, and so they have a big rate-making mechanism. And so essentially, what's happening is those costs are being socialized, and they're able to give you full retail value for that. Third-party suppliers can't do that. They will, if in months when you overproduce, they're only going to credit you for wholesale rates when you overproduce, and they won't be able to bank it and carry it forward. So what we've found is most folks, if your solar system is producing the majority, if not the vast majority of your usage, which most folks are like that, you will not save as much money with the solar if you're on third-party supply. And that's third-party supply through a program like this, or third-party supply you may sign up on your own, doesn't matter. So our approach is always, we ask the utility to indicate to us who has solar, because we've got a net meter, they have records of that, and we pull those folks out of the program so that you're not initially enrolled. However, if you, for some reason, there are some residential customers, not many, that perhaps don't have a system large enough that relies on net metering, and they reach the conclusion that I think I would benefit because they still buy a lot of power off the grid, and if I can get a cheaper price or a greener product or both, then I want to be in. Those folks are certainly welcome to opt into the program individually, but our approach initially is to take them out because the majority of solar customers are better off not being on third-party supplies. We take them out. You're always welcome to opt back in if you think it's going to benefit you. Okay?
Thank you very much.
Sure.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Okay, reports.
I know.
Woman Iglo.
Oh, okay. So Alex and I met with Tom Doty from Shade Tree, even though it wasn't a Shade Tree month, to discuss planting of trees along Millburn Avenue, downtown and Upper Millburn Avenue. And Mr. Doty said that trees die due to salt from snow removal. And DPW now has to put protective wrapping around the low-lying plants we have from the Complete Streets project. So we discussed that maybe there should be town policy for all the trees on the avenue to protect them so we can plant trees up and down the street. And they will not be at risk from damage from the salt spreading in the winter versus a reason not to plant trees. We also talked about when a lot of residents have been calling the building department in Shade Tree about the knockdowns and new building and the impact on their trees. And we need to have definitive rules and appropriate answers for them and the builders. We also discussed that talking to the planning board for new businesses, that maybe street trees should be in their plans, because this has come up at several planning board meetings. And this is an area that we can partner with the DMDA to communicate to businesses about their concerns about existing trees and possibly wanting trees in front of their property. Also, it's been 2 years since Town Hall parking lot has been using the pay station, and the meter poles are still there. And I suggested they should be removed and we could put trees in there. And Mr. Doty said this can be done, providing there's no utility underneath, and Alex said this should be pretty easy to determine. Trees are planted in the fall, and the heat is done, so it might be a great opportunity to get some trees in Town Hall parking lot and anywhere on the avenue. And we have no shortage of rain, which goes into my next topic. In July, I went for the mayor to the Rahway River Mayor's Council. The Army Corps of Engineers in New York had turned our project over to New England Corps, who they felt have more dam experience. And we all went to Trenton,
Quote unquote.
we all went to Trenton hoping for good news from their report. And what the towns have been asking for is for years that the Army Corps of Engineers complete a study to establish the integrity of the dam in the South Mountain Reservation. If it passes, to then install 2 large pipes that would send water downstream by emptying the reservoir before all our towns flood. The initial reports have stated that the integrity of the dam is good and, well, it would hold water. Bad joke. But it should be able to pass. However, the federal standards are much stricter, and it's much more difficult to pass the benefits to risk calculation needed to initiate the study. Now, the Corps said that they would help with the study, they're just not going to pay for it. Because this is this circle. To pre-empty the reservoir, you have to base it on weather forecasting methodology. The Corps does not approve of forecast methodology because it's imperfect, and incorrect forecasts can lead to loss of human life, what happened with Katrina in New Orleans. So, right now, nothing is being done. We've been working on this for almost 10 years. They are not going to fund it, so we now have to kind of rethink our strategies, what we're going to do about flooding caused by the Rahway River. So that was not a happy bit of news. Today we had the joint 911 dispatch meeting, and everything is running very smoothly there. They're online 3 years, fully staffed. They even have backup applicants if anyone should choose to leave. They're in very good shape. And the one thing they did ask is if we could get their funding to them earlier in the year. So we're going to start, I believe the towns are going to pass at the first business meeting in January, which is the second meeting after the reorg, to assure that funding is released and received that week, so the dispatch can pay all their bills due, from the vendors, because there's a little bit of lag time. And that's it.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Ms. Lieberberg.
So I would like to report on the ad hoc committee, the one that is responsible for reviewing the Department of Public Works. And as I mentioned on the July 17th meeting, we had met on July 12th, the whole committee, to discuss our goals and objectives and the consideration of the potential relocation of the recycling center. The current space, review a little bit, is about 5.5 acres, and that includes the DPW, storage, the mechanic garage, employee parking for 40, storage of 25 plows, other trucks and vehicles, other equipment, and 8 garbage trucks that are used for leaf collection seasonally. There's also a fueling station and a salt dome of about 2,400 square feet. So we toured this facility, the committee members, with John Bass and Jim DeStano, to kind of get a lay of the land, so to speak. And then on August 8th, the same group of committee residents, Deborah Navis, Amy Lawrence, Jamie Beneroff, and Marilee Riesback, toured the town's facility, the leaf composting operation, which is currently housed on JFK. The township owns that property. It's about 11 acres. and that was a field trip for further review. The group will be meeting again on September 13th to discuss the ramifications of both tours, the JFK location, look at other potential sites for feasibility and viability, and continue the exploration.
Thank you. Mr. Levy?
No reports.
Ms. Rosenberg?
Yes, the DMDA has been extremely active. Today was a farmer's market day. I hope people were there. It's open till October 30th until 7 in the afternoon, so a lot of the commuters can get it on their way home. The DMDA has hired a consultant in the interim while they're deciding about an executive director. Her name is Beth Lipman, and she also runs the chamber and the DMDA in Livingston and also the DMDA in Springfield. And she's been extremely helpful in helping focus the DMDA on what they really should be for, which is a public-private partnership and more about business development and helping the town respond to the changing needs of businesses than throwing events and parties. So I'm hopeful that the DMDA is on the right track. They are also revitalizing their bylaws, which have been sorely in need of change, with a lot of help from some other parties in town. So very hopeful that things are going smoother. That's it.
Mr. Holmesy, anything?
I like the time, right?
Okay. No, Patrick? No? I have a few things, and then I'll get to you. So this morning, there was a car broken into down the street from me, and I was talking to one of the police officers who said, remember to lock car doors, don't leave valuables in your car for thieves to, pocketbooks, iPads, phones, computers, whatever. Very important. I want to report that we are still working on a potential change to make the left from Main Street to Essex Street. So we're still looking at that. We're still working on that with our consultant. In the affordable housing lawsuit, mediation is currently scheduled for August 20th. Last Tuesday was National Night Out. It was our police department did a large program in the park where we all got to dunk Captain Lip, among other things. And I want to thank them very much for putting that program together. It was terrific, and it was very well received by the community. We got news that our Assemblyman John McKean sent a letter that with the new school funding formula, Millburn Township will receive an additional $884,000 over what has been. Township of Woodbridge has announced that it will be hosting the annual New Jersey Senior Olympic Games. And if there are any seniors in our community who might be interested, they should reach out to the Township of Woodbridge. And again, I'm just going to remind my fellow committee members that we are getting approached on marijuana, so it is something we're going to have to discuss.
Oh, I have one thing I forgot.
Of course.
From the dispatch 911, I think this is interesting that we were one of the first areas to have the 911 Smart 911. All of you might have seen something on the news recently about a young man who was in a car and they couldn't find him. But we have that. There's also an app that we're going to get more information on with a presentation about how you sign up for this Smart 911, which would automatically download all of your information. So this is something that we have, but we can give you more information that you might want to put into your smartphones.
So is it available yet or not?
It is available, but there was, when I went on my phone, there was like 2 or like, I don't know, 9 or 12 to pick from. But he said there's one specific one that is the better one that they all link into.
Okay.
So we're gonna have a presentation about that.
We'll wait for further information.
Correct.
Okay.
That's good.
Mr. McDonald?
Just two brief things. The county has notified us that they've, certified the final tax rate for Millburn Township, which is to apply per $100 evaluation is $1.902. Just wanted to, because the third and fourth quarters, or third quarter is usually an estimated bill for our residents. The fourth quarter bill will be your final bill based on that tax rate. Also, just a general announcement that on the September meeting, we'll be doing a presentation on recycling. I know we've been putting a lot of information out there to residents. We will have members that have been helping us out, Jesse Molman and our intern Victoria Warner, will be here to present on recycling in the township and continue to disseminate that information. To Committeewoman Eglo's point about the Smart 911, we will also be sure to disseminate that information through various medium for the township residents as we get more definitive information. So make sure that's available. I think it's a great program and something that should be advertised.
Yeah. Thank you. Mr. Crockett? Okay. Great. All right, consent agenda resolutions. Are there, before we start, I'm going to remove from the consent agenda, or I'll have a motion if we can, need a motion for this? Motion to remove from the consent agenda, Resolution 18189 and Resolution 18190. We're gonna deal with those separately. There are simply too many typos on the resolution as written, although the noticed, they were noticed properly, just not typed properly. So, may I have a motion to remove those from the consent agenda?
So moved.
Second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Okay, thank you. All right, any comments from the public on the consent agenda items? Consent agenda items only? None, okay. Any questions or comments from the committee on the consent agenda items? And I'll just list them quickly. It's the bills, authorize refund of tax overpayments and tax appeals, cancel fund balances, refund of redemption monies to lien holder, authorize renewal of bus service contract for winter recreation ski trips, authorize interlocal agreements for both the plumbing subcode official and inspector and the electrical subcode official and inspector, authorize livery license, authorize sidewalk cafe license, authorize raffle license, and authorize a revocable license agreement fence. Anything? No? May I have a motion to approve the resolutions listed on the consent agenda?
So moved.
May I have a second?
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? No. Okay. All right, so before we get to, let's do Resolution 18. Where's my resolution for that one? Give me 1 second. Okay. Resolution 18190. Oh, strike that. Okay, let's do Resolution 18189, authorize execution of storm sewer indemnification agreement. It should read, now therefore is resolved that the Millburn Township Mayor and Township Clerk are hereby authorized to execute the indemnification agreement of storm sewer connection for 17 Delwick Lane, Block 1502, Lot 22, as per the recommendation of the Superintendent of Public Works. May I have a motion to approve Resolution 18189?
So moved.
May I have a second?
Second.
Do you do a roll call, or? Do it a roll call, or is it a? It's a roll call.
Mr. Levy?
Yes.
Ms. Lieberberg?
Yes.
Ms. Rosenberg?
Yes.
Ms. Bell Eglo?
Yes.
And Mayor Burston?
Yes. May I have, Resolution 18190, authorize execution of storm sewer indemnification agreement, which will read, now therefore be is resolved that the Millburn Township Mayor and Township Clerk are hereby authorized to execute the indemnification agreement for storm sewer connection for 375 White Oak Ridge Road, Block 4902, Lot 13, as per the recommendation of the Superintendent of Public Works. May I have a motion to approve Resolution 18190 as read?
So moved.
May I have a second?
Second.
May I have a vote?
Mr. Levy?
Yes.
Ms. Lieberberg?
Yes.
Ms. Rosenberg?
Yes.
Ms. Dahl-Egler?
Yes.
And Mayor Barsney?
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. Resolution 18197. Is there any member of the Township Committee that has any comments in regards to Resolution 18197? It is the Bowman change order.
Is this what we had put off from the last meeting because we didn't have a breakdown?
Yes, correct. This is the final change order to close out phase one for Bowman, which includes the amount that is included in that change order is invoiced.
No, it's been invoiced. So on the invoice, this $11,277 is all broken down by line item?
Correct.
We don't have that. Can you just refresh my and maybe the public's memory what this was for, what portion of what?
Sure, this is for the portion of the project that includes the negotiating of the next resolution, which is a settlement agreement with Flanagan's, and the final closeout punch list items, and close out of the project. And that's for invoices through July. There are no other invoices expected.
Does this include the Wells Fargo Spring Street portion?
Those, at this point, those items do not include Wells Fargo.
So they still have to invoice us
No,
for that?
that's already,
Oh.
that we've completed that at this point.
Oh.
Right.
Any other questions? May I have a motion to approve Resolution 18197?
So moved.
May I have a second?
Second.
May I have a roll call vote, please?
Mr. Levy?
Yes.
Ms. Lieberberg?
Abstain.
Ms. Rosenberg?
Yes.
Ms. Dahl-Egler?
Abstain.
And Mayor Barsney?
Yes. All right, Resolution 18198. Resolution authorizing execution of settlement agreement by and between the Township of Millburn and Flanagan's Contracting Group, Inc. Execution of change order number 6 and release of payment pursuant to the terms of the settlement agreement. Do you want to, describe what this is?
Sure, I'll touch base on this. The contractor of the Complete Streets project has submitted various change orders in varying amounts due to extension of contract, product lost, concrete production loss, additional work as a result of some of the proceedings of that project. These change orders, proposed change orders, had amounted to approximately $2.2 million. It was decided that to attempt to negotiate a settlement based on those change orders, and a figure was established for that settlement in the amount of $365,977.52, which also includes $105,000 of change orders that were of an approved nature, which included concrete roadway removal, change order for the lighting subcontractor, and additional traffic signage. So the total settlement amount would be approximately, it would be $365,977.52, plus the retainage that would be due to the contractor as a result of the project in the amount of $82,720.59.
Thank you. Is there any member of the Township Committee that has any comments or questions with respect to Resolution 18198? Mr. Levy?
Yes, Alex, in the fifth whereas clause of the agreement, page 2, the parties, Millburn, are essentially representing that Flanagan has timely and correctly completed all of the work under phase 1. So that's a large and encompassing representation, not just with regard to the change orders, which comprise the subject matter of the agreement, but we're representing that Flanagan's work for all of Phase 1 was timely and correctly completed. I'm not challenging that it was, I just want to make sure that we as a township agree that it was, because basically we are representing, and we have no challenges to any of Flanagan's work.
Yeah, and I think the result of this settlement agreement is to eliminate claims on both sides, both from Flanagan's and any future claims that they would have, as well as the township.
Okay, I mean, as long as Millburn is comfortable recognizing that it may assert no further challenge to Flanagan's work,
Correct.
then it's fine with me.
Well, but it does provide that, that the punch list, any damages, warranties, guarantees, and indemnification, all of that continues.
No, it does,
Yeah.
and it excludes the punch list things, but
Right.
the work leading up to that we're representing is correct.
Correct.
So, one question, where they had to dig up the water main in front of Shiloh, is that included, like, does that not get pulled out? Like, how was that responsibility taken into account?
It would not be taken into account as a result of the settlement agreement.
So who paid for that?
At this point, the water company.
And the patchwork that we're left with, who's gonna fix that and try to make
It's been fixed by the water
it's
company.
been fixed to is where it's gonna be fixed, like that's it, it's as is now
At this point, correct.
at this point.
But it's water company.
The water company has replaced the concrete.
But if it's a patchwork and not what we originally had contracted for, can we go and say, listen, you've gotta fix the entire square and make it nice and make it whole? Not that I agree how it should have been, but that's not here, neither here. So what are we gonna do about that?
Well, that would be the committee's decision as to whether they would want to move away from the settlement agreement to fix that patchwork.
This settlement agreement,
Correct.
so that could be accounted for, you're saying? We could back out of this until that is made.
You certainly could. I think you have to weigh whether that would be something you would want to challenge Flanagan's on.
How did that water main wind up getting covered? So was it not Flanagan's who was responsible how that got covered?
It could have been a error in emission design. It could have been Flanagan's who covered it and was negligent in covering it.
So if they might have been negligent covering it, but if it was a design flaw, would that be from the design company or from the engineers? Like, who do we go back to find out? If
I
we,
think that's a question for the lawyer,
okay,
okay? And I don't know necessarily that that's for this conversation,
okay,
okay?
thank you.
That would be a attorney-client sort of litigation directed
Okay,
conversation,
thanks.
anytime.
Next time.
Is there any other question or comment with respect to Resolution 18198? May I have a motion to approve Resolution 18198?
So moved.
May I have a second?
Second,
May I have a roll call vote, please?
Mr. Levy?
yes.
Ms. Lieberberg?
Abstain.
Ms. Rosenberg?
Yes.
Ms. Paul Eglet?
Abstain.
And Mayor Bursting?
Yes. Thank you. Resolution 18199, which Mr. Chilton discussed beforehand, that is, to authorize electric distribution company aggregation agreement. Are there any members of the Township Committee with any comments regarding Resolution 18199?
I just have a question.
Sure.
My same question about the power, when would this kind of take effect and when could we anticipate this being effective in terms of?
What is the resolution takes effect immediately.
No, but when the aggregation would start, do we know?
Well, we have to go through the
The
bidding
same
process, the whole
process.
process,
Okay.
right. So until the process happens, but it just authorizes us to
Move forward.
move forward. May I have a motion to approve Resolution 18199?
So moved.
May I have a second?
Second.
May I have a roll call vote, please?
Mr. Levy?
Yes.
Ms. Lieberberg?
Yes.
Ms. Rosenberg?
Yes.
Ms. Ballaglia?
Yes.
And Mayor Barsting?
Yes. Resolution 18200, authorize agreement for a cooperative pricing system, as described by Mr. Chilton earlier today. May I have any questions or comments on Resolution 18200? No. May I have a motion to approve Resolution 18200?
So moved.
May I have a second?
Second.
May I have a roll call vote, please?
Mr. Levy?
Yes.
Ms. Lieberberg?
Yes.
Ms. Rosenberg?
Yes.
Ms. Ballaglia?
Yes.
And Mayor Barsting?
Yes. Okay. Now we're on our transferring of liquor licenses. So, do you want to discuss the two, just describe what's going on with resolutions 18201 and 18202?
Yeah, sure.
Thank you.
This is a transfer from Taub Company to the Hills, and then subsequently the next resolution is from the Hills Tavern to Taub Company. And what this is that the Hills has a liquor license that allows for packaged goods, and the Taub Company has a license that is just for the sale of alcohol. They are, in essence, swapping these two licenses.
Does any member of the Township Committee have any comments regarding Resolution 18201, which is the person-to-person transfer from Taub to the Hills? No? May I have a motion to approve Resolution 18201?
So moved.
May I have a second?
Yes. Second.
May I have a vote, please?
Mr. Levy?
Yes.
Ms. Lieberberg?
Yes.
Ms. Rosenberg?
Yes.
Ms. Ballaglia?
Yes.
And Mayor Barsting?
Yes. And Resolution 18202 authorizes the person-to-person transfer from the Hills Tavern to Taub Company. Liquor license. Any comments by anyone on the Township Committee with respect to Resolution 18202? No? May I have a motion to approve Resolution 18202?
Yeah, so moved.
May I have a second?
Second.
May I have a vote, please?
Mr. Levy?
Yes.
Ms. Lieberberg?
Yes.
Ms. Rosenberg?
Yes.
Ms. Ballaglia?
Yes.
And Mayor Barsting?
Yes. Okay, second reading of ordinances. Ms. Thal Eglo, you are the sponsor of 2507-18.
I present for consideration an ordinance entitled Ordinance Number 2507-18, an ordinance of the Township of Millburn, County of Essex, State of New Jersey, amending Chapter 9, Building and Housing of the Revised General Ordinances of the Township of Millburn. This ordinance adds a requirement to confirm that new construction complies with applicable zoning requirements, including height, lot coverage, and setback limits prior to the receipt of a certificate of occupancy. Tonight is the time set for the public hearing and final passage as advertised in accordance with law.
I declare the hearing open. Are there any comments or questions from the public regarding ordinance 2507-18? Are there any questions or comments from the committee?
I would like to thank Michael Jurist, who has worked on this for years through the Environmental Commission, and he has watched this with dedication and really a lot of hard work, and I want to thank him and the Environmental Commission for bringing this to Township Committee, and I think this is a great first step in trying to protect our town from some overbuilding, and I think it's going to be a positive move.
Good, and it's supported by our building department and our engineering department. I move that.
Oh, I
you
see.
go ahead.
Okay. I move that this public hearing be closed and the ordinance be adopted on final reading, and the township clerk be directed to publish the ordinance by title as passed on final reading in accordance with law.
May I have a second?
Second.
May I have a roll call vote, please?
Mr. Levy?
Yes.
Ms. Lieberberg?
Yes.
Ms. Rosenberg?
Yes.
Ms. Ballaglia?
Yes.
And Mayor Barsting?
Yes. Ms. Lieberberg, you are the sponsor of ordinance 2508-18.
This is an ordinance of the Township of Millburn, County of Essex, State of New Jersey, amending Chapter 7 Traffic of the Revised General Ordinances of the Township of Millburn. This ordinance will correct certain conflicts with posted signage on Millburn Avenue, establishing a subsection for 3-hour metered parking and further establishing 3-hour meter parking on certain sections of Millburn Avenue. Tonight is the time set for the public hearing and final passage as advertised in accordance with law.
I declare the hearing open. Are there any questions or comments from the public with respect to ordinance 2508-18? Are there any questions or comments from the Township Committee with respect to ordinance 2508-18? You move.
I move that this public hearing be closed and the ordinance be adopted on final reading, and that the township clerk be directed to publish the ordinance by title as passed on the final reading in accordance with law.
May I have a second?
Second.
May I have a roll call vote, please?
Mr. Levy?
Yes.
Ms. Lieberberg?
Yes.
Ms. Rosenberg?
Yes.
Ms. Gallego?
Yes.
And Mayor Barsting?
Yes. Ms. Rosenberg, you
All
are
right.
scheduled to sponsor ordinance 2509-18.
I am, but there's a little script for you.
Yes. That's for me. Yes. Following introduction of this ordinance on first reading, the subcommittee has considered some additional proposed amendments to the ordinance, which have been circulated to the members of the Township Committee. I would ask that our subcommittee, Deputy Mayor Rosenberg, with the assistance of Committeewoman Thal Eglo, review the proposed changes with the Township Committee and with the public. If part or all of those changes are agreeable to majority of the members of the Township Committee, I would entertain a motion to direct the clerk to publish a new notice considering amended ordinance number 2509-18, amending Article 5 of the revised general ordinances of the Township of Millburn, and adjourning the second reading and hearing on the amended ordinance to the meeting of September 17th. And with that, Ms. Rosenberg?
Okay, so what we did was, with the help of our resident chicken committee in our coop back there, which we appreciate, we've taken a lot of things into account, especially because we know from neighbors who know chickens. So for example, we had 10 feet high and there are residents who told us no, 6 feet high. So I'm just gonna go through quickly, and I'll share with anybody who wants a copy, the red line changes that we've made since our last reading at our last meeting. So since then, we've been aware that the Center for Disease Control and Protection has issued guidance on safety measures, calling chickens pets when there's salmonella and potential for illness is, something that requires us to have regulations. And it's even more important now that we are regulating chickens because, for safety purposes. And Alex, I don't know if you were able to talk to our health official, but I'd like him to, before our next meeting, give us some sort of memo on.
He may be even be in attendance at the next meeting on the 17th when the hearing is done.
Great.
To give some input on it.
Okay, so basically, it's not just about noisy neighbors, obviously that's important to us as well, but we also don't want neighbors touching and possibly contracting illness because people aren't carefully controlling their chickens. So that was one of the things we put in our preamble. We put in a whereas clause, whereas they could basically not be safe if they have salmonella. We also included that there will be one permit per residential property. So I can't get a chicken permit and my husband get a chicken permit, we were trying to tighten that up a little bit. Going back to the definition of coop, thank you, Tornix, it should be 6 feet high. And so we reduced it from 10 feet to 6 feet. And I'm told that's because fences can't be higher than 6 feet. So I'm not sure why people can have chicken coops that are higher than a fence. So that was something I appreciate that we changed. We also defined chicken enclosure, which is something that's a fenced area attached to a coop. And that can't be greater than 40 square feet, and again, 6 feet in height, so we changed that. A few other changes. We talk about requirements that obviously chickens must be kept in the coop or chicken enclosure at all times. No roaming chickens. That's subject to all the regulations of the township. I'm told that failure to get a permit and renew each permit will be a $25 fine. So we added to that, we added some
chicken.
financial remedies. Let me see what else.
Jody, and that's per chicken.
A $25 fine per chicken, so that could get steep. Again, we define chicken coop and chicken enclosure. Also, we said that anybody who has a permit for keeping of chickens shall submit it for examination upon demand. So, should the chicken catcher come to your house and want to know if you have a chicken permit, you will need to present that with your driver's license.
Ms. Dalego, I forget any underlines?
No, I think that we've really worked hard on this, and Kit's law firm has been amazing in constantly changing and upgrading, and I think we've really tried to answer everyone's concerns, and I do not believe that this is gonna make people run out and get chickens. If really it's because if people have chickens who weren't being careful and cautious and respectful will have to be those things now, and they're gonna pay a price, and I don't think that, it's not onerous, and I think that the rules are fair and substantially to keep chickens under control.
Okay, so,
Somebody's asking me right now, so you'll tell, we'll have, are we?
no, okay, so any discussion public discussion with respect to this ordinance will take place once we make the motion, but it will be September 17th, our second,
But you want me, Mayor, to now ask for a consensus of the committee?
Correct.
Whether they agree to the recommendations that we've suggested?
that's correct.
No objection.
I'll agree. Jackie?
Yeah, I agree.
Ms. Dalego?
I agree.
Well,
She made them. So, she
Just
agrees.
checking.
So, then I am not going to then read.
we're basically carried.
Well, we have to announce when it's going to be heard because it is a public hearing on the ordinance. So, okay.
And please note,
May I?
Yes.
Okay.
Mayor Burstein,
Mi-
just to let everyone know that the 17th is a Monday
Oh,
evening.
yeah, okay. Ms. Deputy Mayor Rosenberg, would you make the following motion? That you, to direct the clerk to publish a new notice concerning amended ordinance number 2509-18, amending Article 5 of the revised general ordinances of the Township of Millburn, and adjourning the second reading and hearing on the amended ordinance to the meeting of September 17th. Will you make that motion?
I'm gonna
Say so moved.
Fair enough. May I have a second?
Second.
May I have a
Mr. Levy?
Yes.
Ms. Lieberberg?
Yes.
Ms. Rosenberg?
Yes.
Ms. Dalrymple?
Yes.
And Mayor Burstein?
Yes. I just note also that September 17th is a Monday night because the following night is Jewish holiday and our holy day, and we will not be in this room that Tuesday night. Okay, so we are putting the second reading off until September 17th. All right, my turn. I present for consideration an ordinance entitled Ordinance Number 2510, an ordinance of the Township of Millburn, County of Essex, State of New Jersey, amending and supplementing Article 6 zoning provisions of the Millburn Township Development Regulations and Zoning Ordinance. The purpose of this ordinance is to make some changes requested by the mall at Short Hills to allow them to have a few permanent vendor displays and to allow a small area for the outdoor display of for sale merchandise. All of these have been described in prior hearings, or prior meetings of the Township Committee. Tonight is the time set for the public hearing and final passage as advertised in accordance with law. I declare the hearing open. Are there any questions or comments from the public? Would you identify yourself for the record,
Yes,
please?
I'm John Eggert. I'm with the Taubman Company, the parent company for the mall at Short Hills. I just wanted to thank the Township Committee for consideration of this proposed ordinance, and would also like to express our appreciation to Alex for assisting us through this process, as well as some of your staff and outside consultants, namely Paul Phillips, Jerry Egger, and Eileen Davitt. And I'm here to answer questions to the extent that you have them.
Thank you. Are there any questions or comments from the committee?
I'll make a comment. So when you suggest, we had this talk well over a year ago, but when we talk about permanent fixtures, we're not talking about kiosks for eyebrow threading. We're talking about real food vendors. We're talking about more upscale, correct? Can you give examples?
That's correct. We're targeting food uses. We're not necessarily strictly limited to that, but it is a area of ours. These are permanent installations. These are not carts, movable type of things. They will have a quality appearance to them, and we plan to be filling them to the extent we are going to be filling them with good tenants. There's a limit of 5 that can be placed within the shopping center within its entirety. So we may or may not do that many, but we just like to have that flexibility.
Thank you. I believe we have a question or a comment from a public member.
Carrie Heller, 56 Byron. Having been at the planning board meetings, just to further add, I assume Township Committee people know, but other residents might want to know, the office space that's being created on the 3rd floor of the Saks property is going to be approximately 30,000 square feet. No objection, just that people should know. There's going to be a small patio outside. I think Crate and Barrel is moving to another location. Not for anything to be terribly worried about, but people should be aware of that. I'm not sure what else was specifically in the change, just having sat through the meetings.
Displays. The permanent displays was the other
Permanent
change.
displays, but those are the 3, I think, changes. Very
They
good.
presented to us all this.
Well, the public hasn't seen it.
Yeah, it was.
Actually, it
It was a public.
At a first
presentation.
reading.
What's that?
At a first reading.
No, it was.
Prior
Before
to
that.
first reading.
But for those who are tuning in tonight or here tonight for no other reason, just to make that clear, it was described as just as the gentleman said, but there are a few other changes.
Correct.
Thank you.
Thank you. Any other questions or comments? We have one more comment or question from the public.
Ann Levison, 3 Thackeray Drive, Short Hills. I just wanted to ask, you had mentioned it would be food kiosks or?
Would not necessarily be limited to food kiosks, but it is a targeted use that we would like to add. We've got, a decent selection of food offerings within the center, but we are looking to potentially enhance it. The other, just in passing, I'll tell you that with the relocation of Crate and Barrel into the 2nd level of the former Saks space, they are now currently occupying inline mall space. That's going to free up about 30,000 square feet of that existing space they're in to allow us to bring in other tenants. And we're looking at some food opportunities in that permanent inline space as well that could be, a mixture of both restaurants and retailers.
I'm just concerned with the food, that people will buy something, walk around, possibly drop it on the floor, and all of that, and create perhaps slipping and sliding.
Very
and also
valid,
dirt.
very valid concern. We pride ourselves on the policing of the mall in terms of its cleanliness, and will be very cognizant and conscious of that should we get these food uses, adjacent to the common areas of the center, and make sure that is kept very clean and that those areas are policed and taken care of.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Appreciate the comment.
Any other comments
I
or
just have a
questions?
question. I just have one other question.
But, yeah, don't go away, Ms. Reader, just yet, but
Um,
can we finish with the public
Yes,
first?
yep.
Okay, thanks. I saw there was another public, come on.
Is Lynn Ranieri. I just I have no objections to this. I just, something Jody said prompted this question. Does the township ever regulate anything that goes into the mall?
We don't regulate what goes into the mall, but we regulate by zoning. So this type, when we were asked about this, one of the first things we said was no movable kiosks. And look, the mall at Short Hills prides itself on being the mall at Short Hills. So we, to a great degree, rely upon what they're going to provide
Right.
there. So we're not as concerned, but we do regulate the zoning there.
Right. I assumed we don't oversee what goes in there, but if an eyebrow threading, I don't even know what that is, goes into one of the kiosks, there's really not anything the town would do about that other than
Correct,
maybe
but-
poke them in the ribs or something, right? Okay.
I'm
Just
not
could-
against threading, Lynn. I think it's kind of cool. It's just more about,
It sounds horrible.
it's just more about the Livingston as an example of the movable carts, and it's just a different feel for the mall and a different, sometimes when you see the carts, there's people that work at the carts who say, hey, come here, let me show you, put something in your hair or put something on your, it's a little more,
Downstairs.
sorry? It's a little, it's not the same. It's not the Short Hills Mall. It's not our,
No, I just wondered in general what control the town has over what goes in there. Okay.
Jamie Streeter, 77 Jefferson Avenue, Short Hills. And just very briefly, because you mentioned, and the other woman had mentioned, being clean, walking around the mall. In the seating areas, there is no food or drink allowed, correct? At this point, so where would people, if you were to purchase from these kiosks, where would you be permitted to eat, aside from what's outside of Nordstrom's on the first floor? Is there any area that people, are they going to be set up chairs and tables? Is that going to get in the way? Are you going to permit people to eat or drink in the seating areas?
There are a couple of limited seating areas right now where we do allow some food and beverage. I think right outside of Starbucks is one example of that. But yes, it's a very good question. We would be having some seating in proximity to any unit that was a food unit. Obviously, if it was food intended, for carry-off, such as, specialty chocolates or something that are packaged, not necessarily, but if it's a coffee vendor or if it is actually a food vendor with the idea of delivering something to the customer to be consumed at that point in time, we would certainly be providing tables and chairs in close proximity. And again, making sure that the cleanliness of that area is maintained.
Thank you.
I have one quick question.
Wait,
Go ahead, Jackie.
hang on one
Oh.
second. Anyone else from the public have any questions or comments? Okay. Ms. Lieberberg?
Thank you. Can you give us any more insight in terms of what is going to be the food concept where Paparazzi and Joe's is now? Are you any further along with this Mercado concept?
We are far along. We have a lease signed with the tenant. They're under construction right now. They'll be, they plan to be opening later this year. I can't share the identity of the tenant, but, and I think Jamie Cox, the mall manager, has shared with you folks that it is an Italian food emporium, that will have a number of different types of cuisine stations, if you will, similar to a food hall that you've probably seen in the city or elsewhere. There will also be, within the space, a separate sit-down restaurant area that would be, in addition to the more casual food stations, if you will. And there will be seating, obviously, inside as well.
And will that be breakfast, lunch, and dinner? Is that, or you don't?
I honestly don't know. I apologize. I'm sure it will be lunch and dinner. I don't know if they would be open in the AM. Although I suspect they would have some limited service, at least in the AM, in terms of coffee, pastries, maybe some breakfast items.
Ms. Bolago?
Quick question. The concept drawings were beautiful, and I think it's very exciting. Those 5 potential spots, have they been specified where they're going to be in the mall, or not yet known?
They're not specified as part of this ordinance, but internally we have identified the areas where there is room to have such things without creating issues either from a code standpoint or from the standpoint of just inhibiting free flow of traffic within the shopping center. So we've identified those locations. 4 of them are on the ground level of the shopping center, and 1 is on the second level in an area that's out of the way.
Thank you. Any other questions or comments? All right. I move that the public hearing be closed and the ordinance be adopted on final reading, and that the township clerk be directed to publish the ordinance by title as passed on final reading in accordance with law. May I have a second?
Second.
Have a roll call vote, please.
Mr. Levy?
Abstain.
Ms. Lieberberg?
Yes.
Ms. Rosenberg?
Yes.
Ms. Dahl Eglo?
Yes.
And Mayor Burstein?
Yes. Okay. Do you have another one? Another one, right? 25-10-18? Zoning board? That's me. Okay, new business.
Okay.
Okay, Ms. Lieberberg, you wanted to discuss
Electronic
signboards.
I do.
Okay, you're on.
So, Alex and I have met several times, and again last week, to review electronic signage for the town. In my opinion, this would be a terrific way for us to communicate townwide activities, events, and important notifications on an ongoing basis. I'm sure you are aware that the middle school has a new sign, and we're speaking with several other municipalities and Essex County to discuss specification and costs. I personally believe that we should have at least 2, maybe 3 signs throughout the municipality. Some of the locations that have been kind of discussed informally is Town Hall, the Millburn Library, and placement of a sign near Giro Park. I would welcome my fellow committeemen, women, to weigh in on their thoughts, as well as regarding perhaps any other potential locations. I've also asked Alex to look into any kind of possible grants from the state or the county, or any kind of funding that would be available to defray some of the costs associated with this project.
And what costs are associated with the project?
Well, you have the actual signage, and then you have the landscaping involved, as well as the running the electrical lines to light up the sign. So,
Do we have a ballpark idea of what it would cost?
depending on how many signs we
Well, per sign.
per sign is somewhere, I want to say somewhere between $25,000 and $30,000.
I think some of that also depends on the quality of the sign
And you also have some
clear,
landscaping
yeah.
associated also with the placement.
I think in the past we've spoken about this, and I know that Springfield sign was donated from their DMDA back then.
Their SID.
Their
right?
SID. Livingston, years ago, did get grant money. That money might not be available. Their sign, I think they're looking to replace it, but hopefully there would be a way to defray the costs. I think it's a great idea. I think we need to push the information out to people versus just having people search for it. People don't have time, and I just think it's such a positive thing. And I think we would have to decide who's going to be responsible for putting what information on there and how that's often going to be changed. I just know when I go to the gym in Springfield, they have something like football registration starting, or leaf collection Monday and Tuesday, or a township committee meeting with the dates. I think there's a lot of information we could get out to the residents.
Yeah, it's okay by me, but I think we have to discuss whether it makes sense to have 3 signs or one in front of town hall, one, but you're apart, in different parts of town, or where it's most likely to be used. But
I think it's great, Jackie. I personally think that the more communication, the better. I know that whenever we have something that we can borrow, the police departments will take the one that's on wheels and will say, slow down, or speed, so we've been borrowing, and now that we've seen that the middle school stepped it up, it looks nice, and compared to the high school where you see Dr. Myron sticking out the letters, it would be nice to have something a little more jazzy than when we have the sign on wheels that says, 3-mile race tonight. So I too would be very, very happy to see it. I'd be happier that somebody else would pay for it, but it's also something interesting that you said that maybe it's a special project that leftover funds could be used. that aren't paying, for example, an executive director of an organization or something like that. So I'm glad you suggested that. So I definitely am glad you brought it up.
Thanks.
Okay,
Stay
thank you.
tuned, there'll be more information.
Great. We look forward to it. All right, over the past few weeks, shall we say, we've had a resident who said, had raised some issues with construction going on next door to her. And as we've been able to sort of willow down, that's not the word I'm looking for, but, what? Winnow, thank you. Winnow down some of her complaints. Alex and I have been discussing what changes to our, either our ordinances or to directives or to checklists that we can talk about and raise. So we talked about requiring contractors to, and this is something that we need to discuss and think about whether it's something we want, and we are getting input from the building department as well, requiring contractors to wet down the demolition when they demolish a house, to wet down so we don't have flying debris, and wet down during the removal of the debris. Believe it or not, porta-johns are not required under the building code. It's regulated by OSHA, which is the Occupational and Safety Hazard Agency, something like that. Health, thank you, Safety and Health, yes, Safety and Health Agency. And we're gonna add it to our demolition checklist, and I am discussing with Mr. Falcon's office whether or not we can require it by ordinance or whether the OSHA preemption doesn't allow us to do that. Another suggestion was whether we should require chain link privacy fencing around construction sites at the discretion of the construction official, and that's when a construction site is particularly unkempt and has flying debris into their neighbors. We've had complaints about contractors working on federal holidays, and whether we want to ban contractors from working on holidays. And when we talk about that, it would really be using heavy machinery, something that would negatively impact someone from using their porch, patio, entertaining, and whether you want to do it on Sundays as well. And you have to weigh or balance that, the neighbor versus an owner who wants to do some work, and what kind of work do you want to limit. So those just come to the things. And when you talked about trees in the beginning, I think that was sort of also the same, under the same category of how, if somebody's working on their house and it's going to impact a neighbor's tree, is that something that we should even be involved in? Or should we be governed by whatever, Doty would recommend? And can we really require somebody to protect a neighbor's tree? That's the other thing, you really have to balance what you can do with respect to forcing one person to do something on their property that impacts somebody next door. So those are things that, does anybody have any thoughts about any of this? I know that everyone's been receiving some of these emails.
It's hard when we get 40 emails and we're all copied on them because we can't all respond, because then we can't reply to all because of, it would be considered open public meeting violation. So it's nice to know when somebody's kind of in charge of it, so we don't feel like we're not responding to someone. I know we've expressed that it's sometimes uncomfortable when you keep seeing them and you can't keep responding, but it does seem like you took charge and handled it and met with the person, and hopefully those neighbors feel like they've been heard. But it's definitely hard when we all get those.
So, and certainly we're not gonna make any decisions tonight, so we also wanna hear from the public, if they have any comments with respect to this as well, but specifically requiring contractors to wet down property, houses that are being demolished, wet down during removal of that debris, fencing around construction sites, and working on Sundays and holidays. I'd like to, think about whether that's something we should be adding to our, either to our ordinances essentially. And
That came up with leaf blowers some time ago as well, didn't it? And then it was let go?
Well, that's in Maplewood.
Well, no, but there are people who've asked us about it as well.
I think we found that would be very difficult to enforce.
Right.
That would be the problem with that one.
I do think that there should be some mechanism to protect the existing homeowner if somebody is building right next to their property line and there may be a bank of trees that have deep roots. I think there should be some oversight that kind of balances both the rights of the new homeowner and the existing homeowner. I'm not sure what that mechanism is or how to enforce it, but I do believe there should be some preventative solutions so that the environment is protected.
Well, go ahead. Why don't you do that and then I'll-
Well, I was just gonna add, having been involved in legislation in a number of venues, I think it's really important to have people sit down with you who are familiar with enforcing, who are familiar with the subject matter, demolition, debris, what does it consist of, how is it best controlled, how many times would it have to be watered? I mean, for you to try and invent these things is gonna be very difficult. I think if you get the township engineer, the zoning officer, certainly Jerry Egger, maybe others in the municipality to maybe sit with you in a more informal setting and go over each of these, you know, what kind of commitment of your personnel would be required in order to keep track of these things. Maybe not too much, maybe quite a lot, but those are the kinds of considerations I would urge you to take up with your staff people and people who are knowledgeable on these topics as you formulate what you want to do. The ordinance really ought to come last after all of these kind of investigations take place.
Well, I wasn't suggesting we do an ordinance now, I'm just talking
No,
about
no, or
topics.
however you regulate it, yeah,
Just topic-wise.
right.
It's also been brought to my attention that the location of dumpsters, so if somebody is doing work on a house across the street, that there should be some sort of guidelines with respect to the location of that dumpster. If it's in the middle of the street, it could be hazardous for traffic flow and
Can't be on the street, right?
well, there's one in the middle of the street on Farbrook right now, so.
And on Ridgewood and stuff, there, if the street is small, they don't have a.
Or if the
a
driveway
drill,
is,
yeah.
is steep, but maybe there should be some kind of guidelines that, it could give the builder and the residents some kind of, structure.
Like I've seen dumpsters that either have no reflectors or had like Christmas lights strung on them. But some are just a big block of dark dumpster on the street. So it is very dangerous. So maybe, I think also maybe just having some kind of, like for the neighbors that get upset, you know, we've spoken about this, people don't like construction next to them. If there could just be maybe some guidelines that people can look at so they understand what's allowed, what's not allowed, it might keep them from calling the building department or Tom Doty, and they'll see, well, you know, this is within the UCC, that these codes are allowed by law, and it's not Millburn who's necessarily dictating some of these things.
Okay. Now we'll go back
So.
to our,
So is this in the purview of Township Committee, or is this zoning or planning or
well,
or
it's
a little bit-
policy, a lot of it's policy as to what we think needs to be regulated versus, you know, like dumpsters. If somebody's got a dumpster in the middle of the street, it's probably not properly placed. So it might be an issue of a ticket. You know, does a dumpster, I don't know dumpster rules, so, you know, I don't know if they're supposed to have
Are there rules? I
reflectors.
don't even
have
know
no
if there
clue.
are,
I-
right.
I have no clue.
Right.
But, so, you know, some of that may simply just be enforcement, and some of it may be policy in terms of, do we wanna not allow work on federal holidays? You know, that's more of a policy decision. So those are, but those are things that I think that, at least my takeaway, having been through all of, those emails, as to what really we could affect. A lot of it is just anger at what's going on and a lack of communication between a contractor or coming from a contractor to an extra neighbor. And a lot of it could have been nipped in the bud just with communication. But, you know, that's sort of outside of our purview.
I'm just so that we're clear on what do you want to.
So,
Next
yeah, so
step.
I guess what the next step will be is maybe I will meet again with engineering and the department and come back with some of their suggestions and see where we wanna go from there.
Great.
Okay? All right. Old business. Ms. Thal Eglow, I think at our last meeting, we said that we would come back to discuss what we as a township committee want to do, whether we want to commit to joining the anti-pilgrim pipeline group or punt or what, so.
I don't believe we should punt. I think that this pipeline will be coming down from New York State, and it will come down the Ramapo Valley Reservation down right through our neighbors. Now, it's not in Millburn, but it's certainly on our borders. And by joining the municipal pipeline group, it's right now fully funded. They have a environmental attorney, and the money is sitting there from these certain towns who have already joined. They're not asking right now for Millburn to put any funding in. And it's not necessarily a blank check, because we don't even know if this is going to be needed. But I think from a good neighbor policy, an environmental policy, that if this pipeline gets approved in New York State, it's coming down through New Jersey, and we have a chance to stop it. It's gonna go all the way down to, I think, Elizabeth. I can't remember the map here, but if we sign on to this and we're committing, it gives us a seat at the table. So if it's needed, we are ready to go. Right now, they're not asking for funding, they're asking for Millburn to take one step further. Millburn signed on before you were mayor, against the Pilgrim Pipeline. In theory, in name only, we don't like it. But now it's been moved further in the New York State process, and it's a matter of New Jersey being ready. If this thing goes, we want a seat at the table. I'm advocating for a seat at the table for Millburn to take it the next step. And I'm hoping my committee members are feeling that way, or how they're feeling, they could express it.
Mr. Levy?
Well, there's nothing to challenge right now. It's not been approved in New York, it's not even funded in New York, and there's nothing coming to New Jersey. So this is a improvident use of our time, I think, and certainly an improvident use of taxpayer money to commit dollars to a project that may or may not affect Millburn, that may or may not be approved in Newark, and that may or may not be funded, or may not be navigated through a neighboring town in New Jersey. We have ample time, should the committee, however it's composed at the time, if the Pilgrim project is approved and gets through New York to New Jersey, which could be decades from now, if at all. So I see no reason why we should exercise any vote to convey a really political opinion about environmental laws of this township committee. There's nothing to do right now.
It's,
What, now, you said that prior to my being Millburn did something. What did Millburn do?
I believe it was 2015, we signed on the resolution against
Opposing the pipeline, right?
pipeline. So
Okay.
this is the next step, that it's led by Chatham Borough.
Right, so
Yeah.
here's my question. My question is, so we've already said we oppose the pipeline.
Correct.
And we can join this municipal group at any time, should something actually happen either in New York or in New Jersey, right?
Right.
Okay, so I'm just not understanding the purpose of joining today.
The purpose of joining today, or having the ability that we could have something written up, is that it lets them know there's another town at the table who is not in favor of this. And I think it makes a statement.
Let's who know?
The people who are, the Pilgrim Pipeline people, who want to do this. I think it's an environmental potential disaster. And it's just saying that this is going to be going through Cranford, through Livingston, through our neighbors. And I would hope that if it was through Millburn, that our neighbors would support us.
Well, I think it would be fair, to the extent that the committee even considers discussing this, that the Pilgrim Pipeline proponents be heard, because its website gives a substantial amount of data, as do its proponents, that a pipeline is exponentially more safer than the way energy is currently transferred through barges and trucks and things like that.
Aren't we past that, though? I mean, we've already opposed the pipeline. We've already got a resolution opposing the pipeline. So aren't we actually past hearing from the proponents? Isn't what's before us whether or not we join a group of municipalities to...
Be part of the legal action if needed.
But we can always join the legal act. See, that's where
Well,
my
that's what this
disconnect-
resolution is.
Right, but my disconnect is, there's nothing to join right now, because we've resolved that we oppose it, and nothing's coming down from New York and nothing's happened in New Jersey with respect to it, so we don't even know whether there's ever gonna be legal action. So I just think it's premature. That's my take on it.
It might be, it's
That's-
just that, let's suppose it passes New York, and I don't think it could be decades, Sam, I'm not sure, there's really nothing out there. But let's suppose it gets passed, and why should we have to scramble? Let them know that we're willing to sit at that table, and if it does take some financial backing, we're willing to do that.
Well, the gentleman from, is it Madison or Chatham? I forget.
Chatham, Len
Chatham.
Mesto.
His presentation was, join today, pay tomorrow. And that's what the next logical step is. So join today, and then, by the way, if anything happens, you're on the hook. And it is a blank check, because there's no funds advocated yet as to what you have to do, but if there is, we're gonna bring lawsuits, and you're gonna be one of X number of jurisdictions that have to fund this lawsuit, and by the way, we're in charge of it.
So let me ask you theoretically, if this were to come before us and pass New York and come down the pipe to New Jersey, would you not be in favor of Millburn using funds to fight this?
I don't know, I'd have to hear the other sides of the argument.
I would, but I would wait until it's closer.
Okay.
That's my take on it.
So I guess that's what we want to know, is how do the other township committee members feel?
Right.
I would feel comfortable committing us now without putting funds in, letting them know that we definitely are in favor to fund this opposition. So.
Jody? Ms. Rosenberg?
We've been told by our attorney that we're here to make policy. While we're sitting up here, we have the ability to vote and it's our voice. Sometimes it's just, it's just a demonstration of how we feel, like, for example, with, some policy that we've made before, when we've been asked by certain groups, for example, BDS. So sometimes it's a feel-good or it's a gesture, but we're up here, and while we're up here, we have the right to do that gesture. So if it is about joining a gesture and sharing, I don't want to be seen as the town that's the freeloader on everybody else. So I would. I'm not sure that they asked for more than a couple $100. I thought it was de minimis.
Right now, they're fully funded now, and it's just sitting there in escrow, so to speak. They're not in a lawsuit, luckily, because it hasn't come down from New York State. They want to know that we want, as I said, a seat at the table, and if, it happens that we need to be funding, I personally think it's an appropriate move. Sam doesn't know.
You can buy that seat at the table at any time, though.
Right, that's the thing, you can buy the seat at the table anytime, and that I do agree with.
Okay.
Sam.
I would sit there.
How much, are they asking for any amount of funding? Or how much funding do they have? Do you know what that looks
I
like?
don't know. I think he told us, but I don't remember what it was.
I also would like a seat at that table.
I'll pull the chairs out for you guys.
Thank you for bringing it up.
You're welcome.
Well, could you at least stay on top of it as our,
Yeah, because it
our
comes.
pilgrim
I'll be the pilgrim.
proponent?
By Thanksgiving.
No,
Right, so am I hearing that, I just wanna make sure I understand, so you wanna pass, is this an ordinance or resolution?
It would be a resolution.
A resolution, so then, are you today want, or at our next meeting, or the meeting after that, have a resolution that we are going to join the municipal pipeline group, whatever they call themselves?
Well, and Kit's firm can tweak the resolution that was given to us from Len's group to say there is no check, no deposit needed at this time. That would be fine.
I think I would be their third, but I'd like to just see the paperwork. I'd just like to see what's involved, but based on what you're saying, that it's a commitment to, in theory.
No, well, it's more than a commitment in theory. It's should there be a lawsuit, and then you're committed, as opposed to making a determination at that time.
Right, but what's our financial commitment? We should know that.
We don't know.
We don't, right now, they're not asking for us, they have, the other towns all did put in, they anteed up a deposit. They don't need that, but if it should go to a lawsuit, well then, yeah,
What was the deposit?
I don't remember.
I felt like it was $300. I thought it was
Yeah, it
something de
wasn't a
minimis.
lot of money.
Per month.
300 per month?
Oh,
Yeah, I think it was a monthly fee.
Well, maybe we
It was
should
not
have,
$300 for the year.
maybe we should have,
A little
Len
more.
Resto come back and give us an update.
Well, I
Get
don't
him
know
to-
that we
ask him
need
to
him
do a
come
memo.
back, but
Ask
maybe
him
we can just get some information.
I'll get some more
Yeah.
dollars, and then you could draft us a resolution
Well, do we
tweaking.
have a
Well, we
resolution?
have one, but
Okay,
it
so-
was saying that you were joining in financially and giving part of that money.
So are we going to join, but without the financially, is that?
Without the deposit,
Okay.
without the deposit. If that's acceptable.
Okay, looks like you have a threesome here.
All right.
Okay. So do you have a copy of that resolution? Okay. All right.
Thank you.
And apparently Ms. Eglo and Ms. Lieberberg want to revisit flex parking.
So, yes, I do. So at the July 17th meeting, I was sadly disappointed that we will not be moving forward with the removal of flex parking at the end of August. The flex parking removal was overwhelmingly supported by the community, and to abandon the project would ignore the majority of residents that voiced their opinions against it. It's dangerous, they don't patronize the downtown, and it has greatly contributed to increased traffic in our downtown. I would recommend that we review the specs, include some of the other concerns like the bump outs, the second lane on Millburn Avenue, and work closely with our engineering department, landlords, merchants, and residents, and look closely at all our options and discuss a timetable that works for all the stakeholders, merchants, residents, and visitors. So I'd like to maybe take a little respite, begin the review process again in September. Maybe, Mayor, we should look at an ad hoc committee to address some of the.
Well, I do not believe that we need to address flex parking again. I have been told, once it became obvious that people were told that it's coming out, I had a number of people who came to me who said, you know, I don't want to spend my money that way. I don't want the town to spend its money that way. People park there. People are using it. So I, for one, do not believe that flex parking is the devil that everyone makes it out to be. I believe it is a scapegoat more than anything else. And that's my belief, and that's what I hear from a lot of people. I know that there are people who believe that everyone hates it and that the vast majority, but I do believe that the vast majority of the people who responded, because I think that there's a certain constituency that responds. So that's my take on it. I mean, I'm happy to hear what others have to say as well. I also don't know that that's how we want to spend our money.
Well, I, for one, I believe, I wouldn't want to spend our money that way, and looking at this, that the bump outs, that second lane on Millburn Avenue, the amount of traffic, I think I believe it is worth a serious second look. The people that I've spoken to, that live in my neighborhood are not patronizing the downtown with the fervor that they once did. The traffic is prohibitive for some of them, and they're doing their errands and their shopping in other locations. So I would like to look at this again.
Fair. Let's hear what our other council committee people have to say.
We have when we talked about removing flex parking, we got a description of alternatives. And in addition to removing, there were some interim measures. For example, a bollard sleeve would be $85 a unit. If we're gonna push this off for a while, at least would we consider bollard sleeves to increase the height for visibility and just so people aren't banging their doors at this point, I mean, the total cost would be $3,400. This just seems at the very least, for now, while we're deciding what we're doing, is that a waste of money?
Were the bollard sleeves like a foam covering?
This was
Was it like
suggested by engineering.
Was it like a yellow foam covering?
I don't know that necessarily has to be yellow. I think you know it can be neoprene in some areas. I mean, it would be something that you know we could get additional specifics on.
There should be something, because the longer we wait, the more cars, but have we had any claims?
Claims of damage to cars.
Any damaged cars?
I don't have that information, but I would think I'm not going to guess, but to damage on cars, I believe, to my knowledge, one. But I would check into that if you wanted to understand.
But if it's $3,000 to at least decorate them for a little while.
But we don't want
Well, but
to junk
that's
that up.
not, but the question is it something that you wanna look at? You wanna look at undoing what was done down Millburn Avenue?
Yes, we can look at it.
I think the entire project has to be looked at. As far as one of the other things you're talking about, putting the left lane back at Starbucks, but how about the right lane at the lighting store? That is also the reason why the cars are getting backed up. There was always a dedicated right turn lane there. With that being gone, not only I think it's unattractive, having this huge amount of concrete we never had, but you've lost the functionality of the street and the safety for cars to yield to emergency vehicles. I mean, I don't know why that was ever designed and taken out. Like, that to me does not make, if they were so busy talking about Department of Safety and Department of, I don't know, the rules that Arterial kept flaunting, I think they broke every one of those rules. It doesn't make any sense.
I'm sure, listen, they're a design firm, they didn't break the rules. You know, there's a current state of design, whatever it may be, so to say that they broke the rules, and I think you have to be careful about what you're
Okay, I take that
constantly
back.
saying about
I
Arterial.
take that
It's
back.
not appropriate.
I haven't
okay?
talked about them in a very long time.
Good, let's,
But what I'm
But
saying, I
we-
don't
we are
understand.
where we are.
I don't understand why we don't have that right turn lane, which is what allowed for the yielding of traffic for emergency vehicles. And there's just so many things about the project.
What I don't understand is
Yeah.
why we're so wedded, I truly don't understand this,
Mhm.
why we're wedded to being a 5-lane town. 3 lanes of traffic going east, 2 lanes of traffic going west. 5 lanes of traffic for a small town. It's crazy. You may not like what was done, but to my mind, it is one of the things that everyone seems to forget, that the purpose of what was done was for pedestrian safety, and whether you like it or not, we are a much safer town. Yeah, we're gonna hear about the poles coming down, and there are accidents here and there, and it's driver carelessness, but we don't have vehicle pedestrian interactions the way we did. We don't have deaths on the street, and people forget that that was the purpose, and that purpose has been met. And that's one of the things we keep talking about. I don't like this, I don't like that. But you know what I like? I like the fact that we're not killing people, and I like the fact that if I'm gonna get hit by a car, I'd rather be it at 25 miles an hour than at 40 miles an hour or 15 miles an hour as cars are driving down the road. That's my
We weren't
personal
having
take
deaths
on
on
it.
the street.
What?
We were not having deaths.
Okay, we had a death?
The one girl who ran in, I don't want to say out loud.
May I say that one death is one death too many? Oh, am I wrong?
Well, I think that the jaywalking was a cause of a lot of our vehicle pedestrian hits. And jaywalking has not decreased at all from what I see.
And yet another reason to keep traffic slow. But look, our, you know, we can debate this all we want. We're not going to agree with each other. We can agree to disagree. But I think that, and look, if you guys, if 3 of you want to go back and look at how much it's going to cost to take it all apart, you know, that's certainly up to 3 of you. I personally will not vote to do that. But if that's what you want to do.
How are we gonna look at that if we don't have an ad hoc committee formed?
I don't see how we can have an ad hoc committee. I think that if the three of you, if there are three of you who wanna do that, then we get our engineer on board and we, look at plans to undo it, essentially, cause that's what I hear you wanna do.
I do.
Okay. So, they need.
Is there someone else
Elijah.
here? Yeah. Consistent with our earlier discussion. I'm not wedded to any view on this presently, but I'm, as always, moved by hard data. And it seems to me, the prevailing narrative is that no one wants to come shopping downtown. I don't know if the data supports that. I don't know if it does or doesn't. We hear from largely the same people who either attend the meetings or send us email or write us letters about that the downtown is failing, no one's showing up at downtown, and none of the shop owners are meeting their budgets and things like that. But Alex had presented to me at my request some data on parking, and I don't have it here today. I wasn't prepared to address all of this today, but so I want to look at the parking data. For instance, I think you gave me meter data over the last 3 years, correct? What's that?
Pay station.
Pay station meter data, which is, I recall, is static, if not up, over the last year. And Alex also furnished me data about the utility of parking in town as well, too. And so that belies the question, really, of whether people are not shopping in downtown because parking is too difficult, or the flex parking presents too much of a challenge and people instead are doing their shopping elsewhere, to the extent that they were coming to downtown due to changing stores and those kinds of things as well too. So I'm really moved more by the hard data on that. I don't accept that nobody's coming to downtown anymore, because I see new stores opening up. I see new restaurants. I see and the restaurant owners that I speak to and the shop owners that I have spoken to, and it's anecdotal, and I don't believe that it applies across the board, but it is anecdotal, do not share this narrative that downtown parking and flex parking and the construction has led to whatever sales woes they may have, if any. But that is, again, anecdotal. I would be moved by hard data on this, and I will commit to looking at it. Right now, I'm not prepared to do anything on it. I don't oppose looking at the issue. I also think that flex parking has been around for roughly a year, and I think it needs to mature. I think we have to have a mature look at it. We can't look at flex parking in a few months and people hitting bollards and complaining that it's too hard and difficult to navigate out of the spots and say it's been a failure. Maybe after a year, maybe after a year and a half, maybe after 2 years. I don't know. I think the process needs to mature. And then we would take a look at it. But I'm not opposed to looking at it now and to looking at different alternatives. I also have a concern that if, and I have to look at all the numbers, but if we remove flex parking, return to regular curb parking, which essentially reverts phase one, other than aesthetic, back to what it was before all of this took place, then I think residents have a right to say, well, you've spent X million dollars for what? For what? At the end of the day, after all these years, after the construction and all these meetings, and we revert back to essentially where we were, other than some aesthetics. People may say, how could you have spent all these millions of dollars just to have a little spruce up of downtown? It's not a provident use of our taxpayer dollars. And while this township committee, as a whole, may not have been responsible for that decision, I think it would be fair for a resident to come to a township committee and ask those questions. And I would also want to take a look at that as well too. We'd have to meet the expectations of the township committee about what we've been doing. So for me, where I come out, I guess I'm the Justice Kennedy on this right now. I need more time to see where we are.
As long as you're not retiring.
Not yet.
I'd like to cover the sleeves while if we're gonna keep putting this off for months and months, I'd at least like to cover them so that when I park, I could hit something softer.
We'll look at that, after, okay. All right.
But what kind of mechanism are we gonna have to look at this?
Well, I don't know that we are gonna look at it. We're going to, Sam wants to do some more research. So at this point, we're going to let Sam look at what he wants to look at before we continue this conversation.
And what about Jody?
I'd like some sleeves. I'm gonna start putting them on myself.
Crochet them.
I would at least think that it would be nice if we're waiting for now, because we did move the bollards a little bit, didn't we? Remove some. We started tweaking without us all agreeing to tweak. Didn't you remove some of them?
Yes, the middle bollard.
So if we're doing that, couldn't we, as a pilot, get a few $85 sleeves and see?
Okay.
Is there any reason?
Well, just, we spent $3,000 on the tape, and that has been not successful. So that was $3,000, and the tape is now shredded. And I don't know, it's gonna become a tripping hazard. So, I don't know, maybe we wanna be careful, we spend another we're throwing money after money. Maybe we could just have the engineering department see what the process would be to not necessarily undo, but to reevaluate the single lane that is causing the havoc when school's gonna start again and going down to the 5th grade. I mean, these are things that are true impediments in the town that would never existed before. Yes, it has slowed traffic down. People were not being mowed down and killed. I don't think that's fair to put out there in the public. I really don't.
I didn't
And
say it like that, but go ahead.
okay, so I think there's some real problems that have come with this construction, the way it was designed, the way it was executed, and what it's left us with. And I don't think the town, and there's people from out of town who keep talking about this, who aren't happy. And once September comes, there's gonna be some unhappy people again. Right now, we're in the August lull of nobody's in town, which is why we did elect to try to remove the flex parking in the month of August. So we can wait till September when it all starts up again and all the complaining is gonna start. But I think we should have some ideas ready.
I'm sorry.
Yeah,
I
go
would
ahead.
disagree that nobody's in town, because on the weekend, you can't even find a parking spot, and people are definitely in town. But I think you mean where it's less disruptive to people that are, they're walking
there's no
around
school.
town. I understand. But there's also the second side of town that was supposed to be phase 2, where there are merchants who are wondering from us what's going on, because they have the obligation to repair their sidewalks. And I believe, Alex, that there are people that will, if we don't take care of it, which they thought we were going to do, and that they could be fined. Is that correct?
We've noticed several already. Yes.
Sorry?
We've noticed several.
So there are other merchants that are on the next block who are saying, what are you doing? So it'd be nice if we had a strategy going forward, if we're gonna go forward with another phase, to at least be able to tell them, no, we're not, or maybe we will, but if somebody trips on a sidewalk right now, the merchants have to fix it. So it would be nice to have some movement, whether it's forward, sideways, but I agree, we should do something.
Or backward.
Okay.
I have a question. You mentioned about returning the left turn by Starbucks. I thought that was the.
No.
Charlie Brown's.
No,
Oh, by Charlie Brown's.
Oh.
Okay.
So coming up Main Street, left on Charlie Brown's. That's a very important turn to get
Agreed.
back.
Agreed.
So what's the delay?
It's not so easy, so the engineer's looking at options. Yeah, and that's another thing, so, and that will have a cost associated if we decide to do it, based on some options that he'll give us, so. But we are looking at it actively.
And is that being looked at by a
Traffic engineer.
Traffic engineer.
So Mazer is the engineer, right? Is it possible if we're paying, that we can get copies of anything he's written?
What?
I'm just with the public.
Can we get copies of
I
his research to date?
Don't even hear them. Can we get, I don't know that he's had research to date, but as soon as he gives us something, we'll distribute it.
Okay.
But, we're just mostly talking at this point.
So the consensus we're being left with, we are going to have engineering look at some things, or we're not gonna have engineering look at things?
We can certainly have engineering look at certain things.
Should we tell them what certain things we'd like them to
No,
look
I
at?
think we should let them guess.
So who should tell them, me or you?
I believe Alex actually does it.
So should we tell Alex what we would
So
like?
I think that if you want, we can have you look at that right-hand turn onto Millburn Avenue. No, I'm sorry, from Millburn to Main.
Main Street, okay, that would be a second biggie
Yep.
to start looking at.
Yeah.
Okay,
Okay.
there you go. All right. Anything else on this?
While we're talking about safety, I know that there's been a lot of emails about the Hobart Highland intersection.
Yeah.
A lot. And I too sort of slowed down and looked, and other than getting out hedge cutters, I think that we need to start at the very least, asking the homeowners or having somebody make that more visible. But enough people have asked us for a blinking light, and I understand that, who looked at it and said we don't need one?
No,
Four-way stop.
right, correct.
Four-way stop.
The request from the residents was a four-way stop, in which time our engineering department, which includes an assistant engineer that that is a traffic engineer for Union County for some time, determined by the warrants of the four-way stop that it is not warranted at that intersection. So we are putting together another plan that we're presenting to the township committee within the next week or two, that will improve flow and safety in that entire area, which for your consideration, which would include Station Plaza, Hobart, and Highland.
Is Highland 25 or 35 miles an hour?
25 of them.
25?
There is a close to Christchurch. There's a sign that tells you your speed.
And yes, electronic.
Correct.
Yeah.
Okay. I have a few other loose ends. We're getting some emails on busing. I know that the Board of Ed has to do with busing, but for some reason the Board of Ed put it on the township saying that private school kids who don't use our buses will have to go to the elementary schools to pick up their bus. So I've had a couple of people write this week saying that they've been blown off by the Board of Ed, can we help? And that the Board of Ed sort of said it's up to the township. I'm not sure what's going on with that, but anybody getting any emails?
What are they,
Not me.
what are they saying about the private
So
schools?
somebody who lives on my street has to go over South Orange Avenue to Deerfield to school, that you can only get picked up for a private school by the district at a elementary school.
No, that's not true. That's only true to the extent the Board of Ed, the busing department of the schools makes that election. That's not law.
I didn't say it was law, but that's the new busing administrator has made that election.
But that's not our issue, though.
I don't know if it is, that's why I'm asking. I got an email that said that the business administrator said, it's up to the township to keep your people safe, so talk to them.
But that's not, what's unsafe about that? Because the
you had-
students have to
What
navigate to the
Beverly is on
elementary
it
school
for
themselves,
nothing.
so what's unsafe about that?
They'd have to navigate to the elementary school over South Orange Avenue to get a bus to go to the private school.
Committeewoman Rosenberg, I think in the interest of, I'll reach out to the school. I'll get some additional information. I'll share it with both yourself and Jackie as the liaison to the Board of Ed, so that we can get to the bottom of the situation. Make sure that it is something that the township should even be involved in, because it may not be one of our issue. So let's just make sure of that. And I'll get back to both of you.
What else is your loose end there?
One of your friends asked when we can pick up the weeds in the
Oh, yes.
in the planters
Yes.
around, and we've had some landscaping questions in South Mountain. I know that Alex saw them.
That's being addressed.
Correct.
Okay,
So-
that's it.
I think somebody's doing something.
I have one more old business to ask you about.
Sure.
Any update on live streaming for planning board and board of
Oh,
adjustments?
thank you. I knew I had something I wanted to
All
say.
right.
Okay, I spoke to both Joe Steinberg, who is the chair of the zoning board, and Ken Libey, the chair of the planning board. They said they wanted to talk to their board members, and I guess tomorrow I can remind Ken.
Okay.
And I will circle back with Joe, but neither of them see any problem with it. They just want to run it by their board, so I presume that we'll do live streaming, if not this month, maybe next month, but
Okay.
it should be on board on that.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Anything else?
That's it.
Okay, so.
Motion to adjourn?
No.
Oh, well, these people want to talk to us.
Oh, lecture at me. All right, it is time for public discussion. When invited to speak, please come to the lectern, clearly state your name and address, speak into the podium microphone so that your comments can be understood by all and properly recorded. If you read from a prepared statement, please give or email a copy to the Township Clerk's Office at cgotti, C-G-A-T-T-I, at millburntwp.org. All speakers are asked to limit their comments to 3 minutes, and we request that you not repeat what others have said, but if that's how you want to use your 3 minutes, that's okay. Does any member of the public have any comments they would like to make? Please feel free to come on up.
Good evening, Richard Wasserman, 24 Inverness Court. Just a couple thoughts. I actually live on, as I mentioned, on Inverness, which is around the corner from Hobart and Highland. And I'm always, when I leave in the morning, I'm always passing that intersection. And it's a very dangerous intersection, so the town really has to take some type of action. I'm a little concerned that if you have if you slow things down, that Hobart really gets backed up a lot. But from where I literally sit in the morning, in my car, it seems like the danger is that the cars are speeding down Highland, coming towards town. And it's a very dangerous intersection. Town should definitely do something, and it may just be an issue of enforcement in terms of enforcing the speed limit, because as the cars come down Highland, they can't stop. Like if another car enters the intersection, and I see accidents there literally all the time, and I think we should really take a good look at that. And the other, of course, my other, hot issue is flex parking. I just want to say I agree with Jackie and Diane on this. I don't think you necessarily have to, take it or leave it, or jackhammer it or don't jackhammer it. But I think that you could have an ad hoc where they come up with some ideas, some creative ideas that might, fix things or make things a little bit better. I don't think it's either take it or leave it. Nothing against what you're thinking, Mayor, but I really think that you can have some creative ideas that may alleviate some of the traffic, that could make some of the things better. I wouldn't necessarily agree, to put something on the bollards, because that's definitely, to me, just a Band-Aid on what we could be doing. And you'd also, increase some civic, interaction. I don't know why there's no collaboration with the public. Why not invite people in and invite some creative thought in terms of, what could be done to make things better? I don't think it's a take it or leave it type of situation. So, just my 2 cents.
Thank you.
Bye.
Hi, Marilee Reesbeck, 91 Whittingham Terrace, on behalf of the South Mountain Civic Association. South Mountain Civic Association had hoped to celebrate a decision from the Army Corps of Engineers, ACE, giving the green light to proceed with the flood mitigation project known as Alternative 4A. This project was intended to allow the Orange Reservoir to be emptied in a manner that would release the water into the west branch of the Rollway River before and after the cresting of the east branch. Avoiding the cresting of both branches in Millburn at the same time would significantly lower the risk of flooding in Millburn. Unfortunately, the Corps determined that Alternative 4A used forecasting methodology, which is not approved for ACE projects. It appears that years of work on a feasible solution that would meet the Corps' BCR, benefit to cost ratio, and the lobbying efforts of the Rollway River Mayor's Council have come to a full stop. We were given false hope in June that the ACE chief engineer was certain there was a solution. And then at the meeting in Trenton on July 24th, attended by committee member Diane Thal-Eglow and SMCA President Sarah Sherman, the New England district of the ACE broke the news that the alternative 4A could not go forward as proposed. A solution to a regional flooding problem continues to elude us. We cannot adequately express our frustration that we came so far on this project only to be denied at the point we thought construction might begin. Apparently, we do not have the same goals as ACE, which is concerned for the safety of the people affected by the storm, but not with the reality of millions of dollars of property damage in towns along the Rollway River. The SMCA's involvement in this issue dates back to the aftermath of Hurricane Floyd in 1999. We have advocated for and been successful in achieving flood mitigation projects in the township, such as the flood wall on Ridgewood Road, the Gilbert Place pump, the berm between Horan Circle and Oval Road, and the cleaning of debris from the river. And the township administration continues to examine ways to mitigate flooding in vulnerable neighborhoods in the township. The rejection of alternative 4A by ACE still leaves us without a regional approach to the flooding along the Rollway River. If the federal government is unwilling to fund such an effort, we must look to other plans and other sources of funding at the state, county, and local level. We need to examine short and long-term options. The SMCA has discussed with the business administrator Alex McDonald and John Bass of the DPW some steps that would be taken in the event of a major hurricane. Let's revisit that plan. Is there anything else that might be added? And more importantly, will Millburn coordinate hurricane response with towns along the Rollway River? If there's no plan in place, the Rollway River Mayor's Council must develop one. In the short term, we need DEP approval for river cleanups and dredging. What's the status of channel improvements in the river? And what's the status of work at the Morris Avenue Bridge? The short-term emergency response is critical, but we still need a long-term strategy. It's time to turn to the state and county to work with us in this effort. We are aware that the greater cost share of the Orange Reservoir project would have been borne by the federal government. With that door closed, we're asking the Rollway River Mayor's Council, just 1 minute, River Mayor's Council to develop a long-term regional plan to take to the state. We also want to know if there's FEMA funding for flood mitigation projects available to the towns on the Rollway River. The residents have waited patiently for years to see a regional plan for flooding come to fruition. We still need flood control. SMCA will continue to advocate for flood mitigation, and we look forward to working with the Township Committee and Business Administrator to address this problem. This is a regional problem that affects homeowners, businesses, and municipal governments. It's imperative that we find solutions.
Thank you. Can you give that to?
I have a copy.
Thank you.
Hi, Beatrix Shear, 101 Oakview Terrace. I have two questions about the Builders Remedy lawsuit. The first is, there's going to be a mediation on Monday. What is the process after that in terms of approval by the town? What will be the process? Will a proposal for a settlement come before the Township Committee, and the public will hear about it before it's accepted? What is the process?
Yes.
Yes?
Yes, it has to be.
So
whatever gets done has to come here and to be approved.
And would that be one meeting? That will all take place at one meeting?
It sometimes gets done by an amendment to your housing element and fair share plan, which would require a more extensive process.
Okay, so I'm not hearing it. Would there be one meeting or more than one?
Oh, the housing element and fair share plan is done by the planning board.
Okay, I was asking about a settlement in the Builders Remedy lawsuit.
Yes.
Wait, hold on. Wait 1 second. A meeting of whom? You said, is there one meeting or more than one?
One meeting of the Township Committee at which it's decided, for an ordinance, for example, it's read once and then we come back again. What's the process for settlement of this lawsuit, for the town to accede, to agree to settle the lawsuit? What is the process? I mean, first the town has to work. First, there has to be a settlement between the parties. But what about after that? I guess, of course, my concern is, where does the public get to?
She wants to be heard.
Well,
you
not
want to have a
just
chance
her,
to be heard.
and it's not just me.
No, of course.
I'm just wondering. That's why I'm asking. What is the process?
Typically, if there was an approved, excuse me,
Wait, before you answer, Ed, do you have anything else you want to say? Or is
Yes,
that-
the other
go
thing
ahead.
actually.
Finish what you want to say. And then
Okay,
we'll
well, the
respond.
other thing is also a question, and it's about the Fair Share Housing Plan. It's about the housing plan. Where are we on that? Is that being considered together with the Builders Remedy lawsuit? Where are we on that?
When you say, where are we on that?
Okay,
You mean the
it has
lawsuit?
to go through that has to
You mean
go
the
through a
lawsuit?
judicial process. That has to, what is it, a declaratory judgment you have to get? Okay, so my question is, what's happening on that? And I'm also just wondering if these two things are being considered together or if they're going on separate tracks.
there have been no developments in the declaratory judgment action. No.
Is that the usual thing? It just sits there?
Oh, these things can take a long time.
Oh, okay.
The judge has applications from many municipalities, and there will be mediations going forward. So
That's
it could
separate.
take a while. No, not necessarily separate. It would be, I think, inevitably combined with what happens on the Woodland site.
Okay. All right. Then I have nothing else to say. I'll go back to my first question about the process. I don't exactly understand the answer to the second question, but okay. Let's go back to the first question about the approval process and the opportunity for the public to weigh in. How many times? How will that work?
I can't tell you how many times, but it typically, this case is in the hands of Judge Gardner. If there were a settlement, it would have to go to Judge Gardner.
No.
And then, yeah, and okay, you are.
Well, I'm just saying, Judge
Here,
Gardner
you're
doesn't
interested in what
agree
will
to
happen
the
here.
settlement.
I think she wants to know whether she and others will have an opportunity to be heard about the terms of a settlement
Yes,
before
that's-
we commit to a settlement.
That's exact, thank you.
Okay.
I'm just trying to think how this has been done in other cases I've been involved in. It has to come here, and I think that would be the point at which you would have the opportunity to comment.
Is it, I'm just gonna ask.
Thank you.
Yeah, it's okay. So, for instance, how we do an ordinance, which is there's a first reading, then there's comments, second reading, there's comments by the public. Would we have, the public wants to know that the public will have an opportunity to comment on the proposal before we vote on the proposal.
Yeah, it's awfully tough for me to predict what the process will be because we know nothing about the mediation or what will come out of it. Some of these end up requiring the adoption of ordinances to perfect the settlement. And that
Okay.
would involve what you discussed.
Yes, but what if there
First
is
and
no
second
ordinance?
reading.
What if there's no ordinance?
I think the answer is no, to be fair to her, because we would discuss this in closed session. The term, those non-settlement terms, okay, the stuff that wouldn't go before a different body, would be discussed in closed session because it's one of the Sunshine Law exceptions. And then we would debate the merits of any settlement in closed session. And then we have the right to share that with the public should we choose to do that.
But you may not.
I can't say, I personally can't say whether we would do that. I can't say whether I would vote to do it because it depends on what the terms are. And to be fair, I understand that you want to be heard on this. To be fair, it may be that having public discourse on settlement terms may compromise the ability to settle as well, too.
Well,
I mean, listen, you have to be fair to the situation.
Well, we also have a steering committee, don't we, on the litigation?
you do, but the public is not, does not participate in that, was not allowed to even participate in that. So my question is, once this steering committee thinks they agree, or, once this steering committee decides on a settlement, how are we going to, how are we going to be involved then? Or are we not going to be involved at all?
You're a lawyer, you know how this works.
I'm not
You know
really,
what?
I'm
You know
not,
what?
I'm not
Wait, stop. You know,
a
that's
land
probably a
use
good idea.
lawyer or
You know
a.
what, let us, because I don't know the answer to these questions.
You're a lawyer too.
Right, but it's not the field I practice in,
right.
so let us try to figure
Thank you.
this out.
I would
and get back to
appreciate
you.
that.
Okay? I
Thank
think
you.
that'll be a lot easier.
Thank you very much.
You're welcome. Well,
Hi.
you know what, Mr.
Yes.
I think there was a gentleman behind you who
Oh.
was waiting before you popped up.
I'm sorry.
I'll be very quick. Ed Mazer, Greenwood Drive. This is a housekeeping matter. I believe I heard you say, Madam Mayor, that the Township Committee would be meeting on Monday, September 17th.
I believe so, yes.
My calendar indicates that that's the date of the zoning board meeting on the Exxon matter.
Well, that's about, where are they?
This has been adjusted. The Board of Adjustment meeting will not be on the 17th. It has not been rescheduled at this point, and to my knowledge, the applicant has not submitted anything at this time for that meeting. So at this point in time, there probably will not be a meeting in September of the Board of Adjustment.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I thought that was
Coast is clear. Go ahead, Steve.
Hi, Steve Finkler, 7 Rand Circle, and also treasurer of South Mountain Civic Association. A number of the South Mountain residents have been very concerned lately about the large buildup of debris at the joint meeting pipes that cross the river. I'd like to thank committee member Levy for his help, and we did get it cleaned up. Recently, early in the week, it was all cleared out. Unfortunately, with the storms we've been having, it's starting to build up again. So I have 2 questions. The first one should be fairly simple. I emailed the executive director of the joint meeting over a week ago asking for a regular schedule of when cleanups would take place on a scheduled basis. I got an immediate email response. You will hear from us within 48 hours. That's over a week ago. I have not heard from them. So I'd like this committee to look into and address and provide us with the information of when a regular schedule of cleanups will take place.
They don't do a regular schedule of cleanups.
So
They have to be notified, so you notify us.
we notify you when it, I mean,
So notify Mr.
can we do like a timeout here?
No,
Notify Mr. Levy, notify Mr. McDonald.
Okay, notify
who will
Mr.
notify
McDonald.
Mr.
So it's our job to go down to the joint meeting. Then our feeling is remove the pipes.
No.
It should not be our job to make sure those are regularly maintained so we don't get flooded.
They review everything based on a schedule that does not include storms. So for instance, they don't come out after every storm and see whether or not there's
I'd
debris.
like them to come out before the storm.
They have a schedule, I don't want to misstate what it is, but it's more based on effluent and things like more technical reasons why they come out to check the pipes. And so if there's debris, notify Mr. McDonald, he'll notify me.
All right, number one, it should not be our job to go and check back there. You know, we have to cross through the park. That absolutely the committee has to address it. It should not be our job on a regular basis to go and see if joint meeting has created a hazard where we'll be flooded. Second issue, because my time is running down. There should be a better solution. One of our neighbors, Sandy Inwood, was out there talking to the people as they cleared the debris. She said, wouldn't it make more sense? This looks like a very complicated, costly process once the debris is all caught up in the pipes. Wouldn't it make sense to have a net a little bit upstream that could catch things and then you could pull out easier? And the worker said, oh, that would be much easier and much cheaper. And then she said, and there's this center column of cement here that really doesn't seem to hold anything up. It blocks the middle of the river. Wouldn't it make sense to pull that out? And the worker said, absolutely that shouldn't be there. And so the question is, I don't know if it's Mr. Levy as liaison to the joint meeting or the committee as a whole, and I think I have a little more time because she spoke for over a minute. I mean, somebody has, maybe engineer, town engineer, someone has to look at that and say, what is a better solution here? Should we reconstruct the way the pipes are built and their supports are built? Should we widen the river there? Should we put netting to catch the stuff? And then once a month it can easily be cleared out. But the solution is not for town residents to be people who have to go over to the river every week and see if we have a flood hazard created by the joint meeting. Thank you.
Thank you.
Good evening. My name is Eddie Romulus. I live at 55 Great Oak Drive. We've been living in Short Hills for 12 years now, and we are happy residents. On the morning of Saturday, June 2nd, my 12-year-old daughter and I went to the Millburn Recycling Center to get rid of some ordinary household items. Upon pulling up in my car to deposit our items, we were approached by one of the employees working for the center on this particular Saturday, demanding that I show him my license to prove that I am a Millburn resident. Surely, I thought he was kidding. We have been visiting this center for the last 12 years, that we have been residents and homeowners in Short Hills. I then asked him, "Are you asking everyone for their ID?" To which he replied, "Yeah, you're no different. Yes, you are dumping." Clearly, he was falsely accusing us of dumping. I then told him that I was not going to show him any ID, including my license, because nobody else there was being asked for their ID, and we've been using this recycling center for the last 12 years. He then told me that I couldn't throw away our refuse until I showed him my license, and knowing my legal right as a township resident, I simply ignored him and proceeded with getting rid of our trash. He promptly called the police and started taking pictures of my automobile license plate. I continue. While this employee was calling the police, I asked 3 other people who were there if they too had been asked for their ID, and all 3 of them indicated that they had not been asked for any ID. I then asked this employee why I was being asked for my ID when nobody else was being asked for an ID. He then told me, quote, "I'm asking everyone for their ID," which clearly was false. I, nor my wife, have never been asked to present ID at the recycling center in the last 12 years. We have never seen anyone else being asked for an ID either. I accused him of lying, to which he kept insisting that everyone was being asked for their ID, which was patently false. Roughly a minute later, Millburn Police Officer Laverty showed up in his cruiser. He proceeded to ask each of us what is going on. He asked me for my license, which I gladly showed to him. After reading my license, he tells the employee that I am a Millburn Township resident. Officer Laverty then described to me how, quote, they've been having an issue with dumping. As a tax-paying resident, I do care about illegal dumping in Millburn. However, this employee could not tell me why I was being singled out on this particular morning. I sent an email to Mayor Burstein, which included a nearly 6-minute video link documenting this whole experience. For whatever reason, this individual decided that he was going to target me on this particular day. I'm sure you would agree that no municipal employee, department, or service should ever discriminate against any resident. Furthermore, no municipal employee, except for perhaps the police or a judge, should ever take it upon themselves to demand a person's ID when one is not required. Furthermore, there's nothing outside of the recycling center that indicates that any ID needs to be shown, nor does the official Millburn Public Works Guide. To top this all off, this encounter took place in front of my 12-year-old daughter, who video recorded the whole encounter. She had the chance to witness up front how truly ugly and demeaning it is to see her father being discriminated. She sat there in the car and cried and had to endure the anguish of seeing this play out right in her own neighborhood. It is a dangerous precedent when a municipal employee representing his or her role as a Millburn Township employee uses their own bias to determine who and under what circumstances a legal resident gains or is denied access to services he or she is entitled to. I entered the town recycling center in a 4-door sedan, no dump truck, with a Millburn parking permit that is only issued to Millburn residents. I also entered the center that day with my school-aged daughter. I will not allow her or any other lawful Millburn Township resident to be discriminated against or treated unfairly at the whim of anyone, including a municipal employee. She will not be targeted or made to feel less than in her own hometown. This was an egregious violation of our personal rights, and I officially requested that the Township of Millburn respond, including an apology to my family, which they have thankfully done. I want to publicly thank the mayor and her team for responding in kind and putting in measures to minimize the risk of this happening again in the future, including improved signage, guidelines, and training. They have even invited my daughter to the Millburn Recycling Facility. Thank you very much. On this particular June day, this is my final point here, like most any other Saturday mornings, I was just a dad running a quick errand after picking up my daughter from her tutoring academy before heading home to get ready for a music recital. We did not expect to be denied access to the recycling center, lied to about others also being ID'd, and have the police called upon us. This is clearly the definition of harassment. Is that the way each of you would want to spend your Saturday morning? Thank you.
Phil Kirsch, 93 Cedar Street. I want to speak to the Pilgrim Pipeline discussion, try to remember some of the things I said a couple of months ago about this. First of all, I think that it's my understanding that even though the pipeline will not run specifically through Millburn, that it is going to potentially threaten our watershed and our water supply. So I think that's really the same thing. Does it have to run through our town when it's going to threaten our town's water supply? Secondly, I think that the idea that this won't cost us anything unless it passes through New York State, okay, if it doesn't get that far, it won't cost us anything. If it does get that far, then I think we need to be on board with this. I think we also need to be good neighbors to other communities. I think that in a town that is looking to get renewable power in an aggregation, in a town that likes to plant trees, that likes to promote the environment, I think that not being on board on this as an example is a very bad idea. And I would say, last, that there's every good reason to get on board with this now. It should have been done a couple of months ago, because momentum means everything. And you can wait till the boulder's coming down the hill before you try to stop it, but then it's going to run you over. It's everything to say to these companies who are trying to do this that there is tremendous opposition already mounting. That's what stopped a lot of these pipelines so far. The difficulty communities have put up by citizens not giving rights to get their measurements for the DEP. For just showing the opposition, they'll get companies to back off from this fossil fuel. So I think there's every reason to do this. There's every reason to do it now. And if it does end up costing the town some money, it's going to be some of the best money the town ever spent. Thank you.
Thank you.
Motion to adjourn?
No, so moved. Wait, no, not yet, sorry.
Sarit Katz, Fairfield Drive. Couple of points. I wanted to talk about the construction sites and everything. It was mentioned that new people who are coming and then renovating homes versus existing homeowners. And some construction is done by existing homeowners. And there is quite a bit of regulation of where you can put dumpsters and things like that. So, every new regulation just adds to the cost and adds these, and it makes it onerous for people who maybe want to, add on a room or whatever it is. Or my neighbor had a big flood and they've been trying to remediate the house now for, months, almost a year, I think. And, it's terrible what happened to her. So, I wouldn't want to make it worse. Okay, so that said. I just want to ask, Mayor, at one point you were in favor of an ad hoc committee to look at complete streets, and now you're not. And I just do think it would be good to have more input and take a look at it. It wouldn't cost anything to take a look. It doesn't have to be a binary choice between putting it exactly back the way it was versus fixing some of the things. You're looking into potentially returning the left turn lane from Maine to Essex. Why not the right turn lane from Millburn to Maine? There are things that can be done to make it better. That doesn't have to be, A or Z. There's a lot of room between alpha and omega. It could be any of those things. I wanted to mention to Committeeman Levy about hard data. We'd all love to have hard data. There was a survey done. If that's not a good enough hard data, which was overwhelmingly against the flex parking, but it was limited to flex parking, the comments were not. There were 65 pages of comments. They were overwhelmingly negative. But we also could have a referendum on the November ballot, and that would be hard data. And in terms of, you're right, people could ask very, very, very wisely, how come we spent all this money? How come the town spent all this money and now we have to spend money to remediate it? But the town did speak up about this. They did it through elections. They already voted off the two committeemen who were most involved in pushing this through, and then subsequently added in Mr. Tillotson, who said to him publicly that voting on him was a referendum on complete streets, and he does not sit with you now. So this agreement that you voted on without letting us talk, the settlement agreement with Flanagan's, which amounts to almost $450,000, and we, Committeewoman Eglow never got the answer as to who's responsible for fixing, is it the water company or whatever, but we've, as you pointed out, now said it's okay, what they did was fine. We've signed off on it. Can we add that to the punch list? I mean, it was very, very reasonable. And I appreciate everyone's being concerned about the cost of bollard sleeves and electronic signs, or potentially what it might cost us to oppose the Pilgrim pipeline. But I wonder why nobody was paying such close attention to the bottom line when some of you voted to approve the construction by Wells Fargo when there wasn't even an estimate on the table. That was the time to ask questions about money. Now we're worried about money. We should always be. You have a fiduciary responsibility to the town. You also have a responsibility to act according to reasonable wishes of the town. And the town, and to say that you're not sure if the business is down, I mean, it's crazy. You got to talk to the merchants. They will tell you. And I think Committeewoman Benjamin Lieberberg talked about other people outside the town. Every time you go to a dinner party, you meet a new person, you tell them you're from Millburn. What do they say? What did Millburn do to the downtown? That's what they say. Mayor.
Are you finished because your time is up?
Yes, I know, Mayor. I know. It's outrageous to let people who live and pay taxes in this town actually speak for 4 minutes. That's unreasonable.
Carrie Heller, 343 Millburn Avenue. Too many places to go. Committeeman Levy, if I may ask, if we're not going to remove flex parking, we still have, Alex, by my calculation, it was an $8.2 million bond. Again, it's never, ever offered what we've either fully spent or how much is left of that bond that we're paying interest on. By my calculation, it might be about $1.7 million.
I gave you the number in an
No,
email.
but tonight. Tonight.
I mean, I don't have the figure exactly in front of me, but I believe the
We
number
never-
I gave you was approximately $2.1 million is left on that ordinance.
After tonight's
Correct.
expenditure that's been
Correct.
approved? All right, so we're paying interest on that. So back to, if we're not spending that money and continuing to phase 2 and phase 3, whether it was as designed by Arterial or another design, I'm going to suggest give the money back to the taxpayers. Everybody seems to be consumed with money rather than productivity, increasing ratables, increasing values, increasing the amount of money that's perhaps coming into the downtown and the properties, rather than the tax appeals that, of course, are occurring. We don't talk a lot about that. So why don't we talk about either spending the money or giving it back, as well as for the public and people who are new to coming to the meetings or even new on the Township Committee. There's a $3.7 million bond authorization that was done before Bork and Mount got out of office. The last meeting of, I've lost track of the years now, but I think 16, I could be off by a year. That's sitting out there that enables you at your whim, so to speak, to spend another $3.7 million on phase 2 and phase 3, which I may support. We don't have a plan. We don't even have an architect. We don't have an engineer. We don't have a Flanagan. I don't even have the brick pavers back in place after the water company's debacle out there in Flanagan, and you've signed off on something today, yet they put concrete back in place instead of the stone. My question to the Township Committee, you're in office 20 months. You say that we need to wait and maybe evolve and see what the flex parking, whether it's going to work or not. You're in office now 20 months almost. You've got, by my calculation, 16 months left. What are we going to do? You may run again. I'm not making any aspirations about that. But what are we doing going forward? We haven't done anything for 16 months other than complain. So why don't we move forward with phase 2 or phase 3? or evaluate, the traffic light, the signalization. There's any of 50 things that we should be evaluating that something went wrong. Not everything went right. The traffic light configurations, the left-hand turns, the right-hand turns, the bump outs, the light poles that are the wrong locations, the light pole that is illegal by township ordinance in front of La Strada because you don't have the proper passage between their outdoor seating and that light pole, and you keep telling me over and over and over again that it's going to be removed. Instead, we're waiting for light poles. We've now 2 poles down. A third one has been dented. Others that have probably been hit that we don't know about. We need to move something forward or to change something or evaluate. We can't just be sitting here. We don't all wish to be coming and to be doing this over and over again. Let's move it forward. Let's get whether an ad hoc or whether go and do what Ted and Ian did in the Township Committee and load up the DMDA with people, and an ad hoc that's also loaded up with township employees, and get this thing, I'm not going to use the word, but incorrectly processed forward of what they did, and that's how this all did take place and why we were all here. Whether it's right or wrong and done properly, the process was absolutely wrong. For all of us that know and know, you were the only person really, you sat, but you were here. I have the transcripts. I have every meeting. I have every email. I have everything from the litigation. You sat quietly, maybe for good reason, because the 3 of them were really conducting the meeting. But the process was not right. The inclusion was not right. Arterial was not right. But the people that were reviewing and advising Arterial within the town was not correct. We need to do something, and we beg of you, and I'm not suggesting that you're going to answer tonight. We'll go into the next meeting. But it's time. Please consider. Last, just bear with me 1 second. DMDA, are we funding, not funding? What's the status of DMDA?
We're funding.
Without asking what dollars they have, don't have, I would just suggest to you, with the process that has occurred, having gone through 4 presidents, 9 board members out of 15, a new director temporary, which we don't know what her pay or anything is. Nothing's been given to
As
the...
I said, there could be 10.
I'm sorry?
Just have to jump on board.
No, they don't wish me.
We know her
But
pay.
that's not... But my question is, there's $100,000 and there's only now 4 months left in the year. We should, as a township, as the taxpayers, as property owners, I'm speaking on behalf of myself but haven't spoken with many of the owners, let's just find out how much money they owe, how much money they really need to the end of the year. If they don't need the full 100, fund them with 50. Let them come back again in October. I'm not suggesting, right? The law, as you said, has been voted on. You used other...
Yeah, I don't know if we can do that. That's the thing.
You can.
I
I've read.
don't know.
I've read our ordinance. You can.
You and
have.
I don't always agree legally, so
Right.
I would suggest that maybe we'll look at that and then. make
Please
a
look at it
decision.
before writing out the
We'll
check
look
for
at
the
it.
full amount. I'm not suggesting disbanding anything. I'm suggesting at this point, look at the dollars and see whether.
I think they have somebody who's gonna work out really well.
No, it's a temporary person.
Correct.
Talking about David.
That's a president.
Right, I understand, but.
This board's going to run without you, one person. You can't run an organization with one person.
Agree. No, I agree.
I'm not questioning. We're not questioning that. I'm not here to question. I'm questioning whether the dollars are needed to get through.
I understand that.
That's
And
all.
I said I don't know whether or not.
I'll be
we
happy to
have
talk to you about that. They, at their last meeting, went over their budget, went over their numbers. They talked about having some extra money that they were thinking about putting aside for a special project or planning or things like that. Because they
If I-
didn't have every dollar earmarked, and they
As-
talked about their upcoming budget.
As I think the township and the taxpayers downtown and the merchants would be interested in knowing that, I think that should be offered to us, as well as Beth Lippman's contract of what she's even been hired to do. We don't even know that.
She's a consultant.
We don't, I hear you, I've sat in on a meeting, but for the most part, people don't know. I'm just asking again for transparency, and let's see if the dollars are needed. And if they are, as you say, I don't have an objection to that, but we don't know. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else? Going once, going twice. Motion to adjourn.
Motion to adjourn.
Second?
Second.
Adjourn. All in favor? I guess we should do that first, right?
Short meeting, 10:15.